Case 1. June 23, 1981, New Ashford, Massachusetts. 15-year-old Laura Sheridan was reported abducted after accepting a ride home from a stranger while walking a familiar route from a bus stop. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when the vehicle slowed near her house but did not stop. Instead, it continued past her home. Within days, attention turned toward a local man whose movements and behavior during that evening raised early concern among responding authorities. The incident began in the late afternoon when Laura accepted a ride from a man offering to take her home. After passing her residence, the driver accelerated and refused to stop. When Laura sensed danger, she attempted to escape and pleaded to be released. Investigators later confirmed the man reached for a firearm concealed inside a paper bag, escalating the situation. A struggle followed inside the vehicle as Laura fought to regain control. The car eventually pulled off near Route 7 close to a rest area. Laura exited the vehicle and ran toward the roadway, drawing attention from passing motorists. One driver stopped to assist her, while another followed the fleeing vehicle long enough to record its license plate. Police were contacted shortly after, and Laura was transported to safety. But the evidence at the scene did not match the initial assumptions. At the time, Laura was a teenager following a routine common in small New England towns during the early 1980s. Hitchhiking short distances was not unusual, and familiarity with neighbors and local roads often replaced caution. Laura regularly walked the route from the bus stop to her home and had no prior history of incidents along the way. The community environment fostered trust, particularly toward adults offering assistance. That trust shaped the circumstances that allowed the crime to occur. Laura's family life and school routine reflected stability, making the incident appear sudden and uncharacteristic. It would take only days for her ordinary routine to become the focus of a serious criminal investigation. Law enforcement responded quickly after Laura reached safety. Officers collected her account, secured the area near Route 7, and followed up on the license plate information provided by a witness. The suspect was identified and charged with assault and weapons-related offenses. Investigators examined physical evidence and reconstructed the timeline of the attempted abduction. However, limitations in forensic methods and corroborating evidence weakened the case. During court proceedings, the defense challenged the reliability of available proof. As a result, the suspect was acquitted of the charges. With no conviction and no further evidence at the time, the case was effectively closed, leaving unresolved questions surrounding the attempted kidnapping. More than 4 decades later, advances in investigative techniques prompted renewed scrutiny. In 2024, prosecutors convened a grand jury to re-examine the events of June 23, 1981. Laura provided testimony recounting the incident, and investigators reviewed historical records alongside newly available information. Interstate coordination between Massachusetts and Vermont authorities allowed previously disconnected details to be reassessed. The renewed investigation established a clearer pattern of behavior linked to the suspect. Evidence that had once been insufficient was reevaluated in light of corroborating findings. When confronted with the accumulated record, the suspect agreed to resolve the case through a plea. In December 2025, the suspect pleaded guilty to kidnapping charges related to the 1981 incident. The court imposed a prison sentence to be served concurrently with an existing term from a separate conviction. The plea formally acknowledged responsibility for the crime, bringing legal resolution after decades of uncertainty. For investigators, the outcome closed a case that had remained incomplete for much of Laura's life. The proceedings underscored the lasting impact of delayed justice and the role of survivor testimony in reopening cold cases. Even after the sentence, the case remained a reference point in discussions about accountability across time. Case 2. September 18, 1986, Manchester, Vermont. 32-year-old golf professional Sarah Hunter was reported missing after failing to return home following a routine evening. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when her car was later located abandoned near a local gas station. The circumstances did not align with her habits or schedule. Within days, attention turned toward a gas station employee who had last seen her alive during the late-night hours. On the evening of September 18, Sarah left her boyfriend's residence intending to return home and prepare for an upcoming professional certification. Before doing so, she stopped at a gas station in Manchester to purchase cigarettes. The station was staffed by a Angli employee working the night shift. Investigators later determined that Sarah was forcibly restrained inside the station, bound with rope, and prevented from leaving. When the shift ended, she was forced into the trunk of a vehicle and driven south toward a remote area. She was not seen again that night. The following morning, September 19, she was reported missing by a coworker after failing to appear as expected. Her vehicle was eventually found abandoned, raising immediate concerns. But the evidence at the scene did not match the initial explanations. Sarah was a respected golf professional at the Manchester Country Club and was well known within the local community. She had helped develop junior golf programs and was regarded as dependable and disciplined in both her career and personal life. Her daily routines were consistent, and she maintained close contact with friends and coworkers. On the night she vanished, she had followed an ordinary pattern, making her disappearance especially concerning. There was no indication she planned to leave town or disrupt her schedule. Her role in the community and predictable habits shaped early assumptions that something had gone wrong rather than a voluntary absence. It would take only days for her stable, structured life to become the center of a major criminal investigation. Law enforcement focused early attention on the gas station where Sarah was last seen. David Allen Morrison, an employee working that shift, became a person of interest due to his proximity and opportunity. Investigators examined his background and movements and searched for physical evidence linking him to the disappearance. Despite these efforts, forensic limitations at the time prevented a direct connection. Hair and trace evidence could not be reliably matched, and no eyewitnesses placed Morrison with Sarah beyond the station. Without conclusive proof, prosecutors were unable to file charges. As months passed without new leads, the investigation stalled. The case gradually went cold, despite lingering suspicions surrounding the initial suspect. Decades later, advances in forensic science prompted renewed examination of the evidence. Investigators reevaluated preserved materials using modern DNA testing techniques. Interviews were reopened, and case files were reviewed with a fresh perspective. This process revealed inconsistencies in earlier forensic conclusions and allowed previously unusable evidence to be tested accurately. The results linked biological material from the crime scene to Morrison. Former investigators who had worked the case were consulted, and renewed pressure was applied. During a subsequent interview, Morrison admitted responsibility for Sarah's death, aligning his statement with the physical evidence that had finally been validated. In 2025, Morrison entered a guilty plea in connection with Sarah Hunter's murder. The court imposed a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The plea formally resolved a case that had remained unanswered for nearly 40 years. For Sarah's family and the community, the outcome marked the end of prolonged uncertainty. Investigators noted that the case demonstrated the consequences of early forensic limitations and the impact of later technological advances. With the conviction secured, the case was officially closed, concluding one of Vermont's longest-running unsolved murders. Case 3. July 20, 1990, Madison County, Illinois. An unidentified woman was found deceased in a soybean field near a rural intersection. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared with evidence indicating she had been killed elsewhere and later transported to the location. The condition of the body suggested violence and deliberate placement. Within days, the case stalled due to one missing element that prevented further progress: her identity. The discovery was made by a farmer working in the field who noticed a body lying among the crops. Law enforcement responded and secured the scene, documenting multiple stab wounds and signs that the victim had been deceased for approximately a week. Investigators determined the killing had likely occurred at another location before the body was left in the field. Items recovered included clothing, shoes, and jewelry, all cataloged for potential identification. The coroner preserved biological material in anticipation of future testing. Despite processing the scene and issuing alerts to surrounding jurisdictions, no immediate leads emerged. There were no witnesses, no vehicle sightings, and no missing person reports that matched the victim's description. But the evidence at the scene did not lead to a name. Without an identity, investigators faced immediate limitations. The woman appeared to be approximately 30 years old, but nothing else connected her to a known address, employer, or family. Her fingerprints were not on file, and no matching reports were located locally or nationally. Over time, she was assigned a Jane Doe designation and buried with a simple marker. Periodic reviews of the case produced no new information. Composite sketches were created and distributed, including a clay reconstruction released years later, but no credible identifications followed. As decades passed, the absence of a name prevented investigators from establishing her movements, relationships, or final hours. The case remained open but inactive, defined by unanswered questions rather than actionable leads. In later years, renewed interest in unresolved cases prompted Madison County authorities to revisit the file. Advances in forensic science offered tools that had not existed in 1990. The preserved biological evidence was submitted to state laboratories for modern analysis. Investigators partnered with specialized forensic genealogy teams to explore potential familial connections through DNA. This process involved building extended family trees using distant genetic matches. The work required months of verification, cross-referencing public records, and narrowing possibilities. State and federal agencies collaborated to confirm findings and rule out errors. Gradually, a profile emerged that suggested the victim's origins lay far from Illinois. In 2025, the genealogical investigation reached a conclusion. The unidentified woman was confirmed to be Winona Nadine Wendy Michael, born in 1959. Records showed she had lived in multiple states and traveled frequently. Investigators traced her last confirmed contacts to the months preceding her death, establishing a clearer timeline of her movements. Family members were located and notified after verification procedures were completed. The identification resolved the central barrier that had stalled the case for more than 3 decades. It also reopened questions that had never been answered, including where she was killed and who was responsible. Following the identification, authorities informed surviving relatives and provided details of the investigation. While the confirmation ended years of uncertainty about her fate, it did not resolve the homicide itself. Investigators acknowledged that critical gaps remained regarding her final days and the circumstances of her death. The case remained classified as an active homicide investigation, with appeals issued for information related to her travels and associations in 1990. For law enforcement, the identification marked progress rather than conclusion. The search for the individual responsible continued, decades after the crime first entered official records. Case 4. April 2, 1983, Louisville, Kentucky. 3-year-old Michelle Marie Newton was reported missing after her mother departed early with the child and failed to return from a claimed relocation trip. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when all communication abruptly stopped and no forwarding information was provided. The child did not arrive at any new address. Within days, attention turned toward Michelle's mother as the sole adult known to be with her when contact ended. The The custodial disappearance began when Michelle's mother left the family residence with the child, stating she was traveling ahead to prepare housing and employment. When Michelle's father arrived later, both were gone and no destination could be confirmed. Law enforcement issued alerts and obtained an arrest warrant for custodial interference. Early efforts focused on tracing travel routes, relatives, and employment records, but no confirmed sightings followed. As years passed, the absence stretched into decades. The case remained open but produced no verified leads. Michelle grew from a missing toddler into an adult without authorities knowing her location. Despite periodic checks, the mother and child remained unaccounted for, and the disappearance became one of Kentucky's longest-running parental abduction cases. Michelle's early childhood had been spent with both parents before the sudden separation. After the disappearance, she was raised under a different name and identity, unaware of her biological father or the circumstances of her infancy. She attended school, formed relationships, and later built a family of her own without knowledge of her past. No records indicated she questioned her identity. Her upbringing occurred entirely outside official awareness, shaped by an assumed family history that did not reflect reality. The absence of a missing person report in her adult name prevented recognition. For decades, Michelle lived an ordinary life while remaining legally classified as missing. Over time, investigative limitations reduced active follow-up. In the early 2000s, the case was removed from some national databases due to stale information and lack of contact with reporting parties. Years later, renewed interest from extended family prompted authorities to reopen the file. Investigators re-entered the case into modern systems and coordinated with national organizations specializing in missing children. Age progression imagery was developed and distributed to reflect Michelle's likely adult appearance. These efforts aimed to generate public recognition and tips. Despite renewed attention, no immediate results followed, and the case continued without confirmation of her whereabouts. In 2025, a tip received by investigators identified a woman living under an alias in Florida whose appearance matched the age progression image. A joint task force reviewed records and obtained DNA for comparison. Testing confirmed a familial match linking the woman to Michelle's biological relatives. Authorities located and arrested Michelle's mother, who had been living under an assumed name for decades. The identification established that Michelle had been alive and residing in the United States throughout the entire period. The confirmation resolved the central mystery of her disappearance and formally ended her missing status. Following identification, arrangements were made for Michelle to reunite with her biological father, whom she had not seen since early childhood. The reunion occurred after more than 40 years of separation. Legal proceedings against her mother advanced on custodial interference charges, with no statute of limitations applicable. Michelle cooperated with authorities as the case moved forward. While the criminal process continued, investigators emphasized the significance of the recovery. The case closed with Michelle no longer classified as missing, marking the end of a decades-long parental abduction investigation. Case 5. February 19, 1986, Roseville, California. Human skull fragments were discovered along Dry Creek near Booth Road in an unincorporated area. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared with the inability to determine who the remains belonged to or how they arrived there. The limited condition of the remains prevented identification. Within years, the case faded from active investigation and entered long-term evidence storage without resolution. The remains were located by investigators conducting work near the creek bed. Only partial skeletal fragments were present, offering little information about the circumstances surrounding the death. At the time, forensic technology could not extract usable biological identifiers from the material recovered. No personal items were found nearby that could establish identity. Investigators documented the location, preserved the fragments, and entered the case into missing persons systems. However, without fingerprints, dental records, or viable DNA, comparisons yielded no matches. Early forensic limitations restricted conclusions about cause or manner of death. With no immediate leads and no reports that could be linked to the remains, the investigation stalled shortly after its initial phase. Years earlier, Marjorie Lahan had been reported missing in October 1982 in Sacramento County, California. She was 49 years old at the time and known to her family as a mother with creative interests and an active lifestyle. Her daily routines included artistic pursuits and outdoor activities. When she disappeared, no foul play was suspected, and no immediate indicators suggested a crime had occurred. Her absence did not initially generate a criminal investigation, and no connection was made between her disappearance and the remains found years later. Without confirmed evidence linking her to any crime scene, her case remained unresolved, gradually slipping from public attention. Decades later, the Placer County Cold Case Team initiated a review of unidentified remains held in evidence. Advances in DNA technology allowed investigators to re-examine cases previously thought unsolvable. The skull fragments recovered in 1986 were submitted to the California Department of Justice for renewed analysis. Specialists attempted modern extraction techniques capable of working with degraded samples. Investigators coordinated with forensic laboratories and reviewed missing persons cases from surrounding counties. This systematic effort aimed to establish identity rather than determine cause of death, recognizing that confirmation alone could bring long-delayed answers to families. In December 2025, forensic testing produced a successful DNA profile from the preserved remains. The profile was compared against genealogical databases and matched with a family member of Marjorie Lahan. Further verification confirmed that the remains belonged to her. The identification resolved a connection that had been missing for nearly 4 decades. Investigators formally linked the 1986 discovery to her 1982 disappearance, closing the question of her whereabouts. The breakthrough demonstrated the impact of renewed forensic analysis on long-standing cold cases. Following the identification, authorities notified Marjorie Lahan's family and updated official records. Due to the limited nature of the remains, investigators stated that no cause or manner of death could be determined. The case did not result in criminal charges, and no suspect was identified. Officials emphasized that the identification itself represented a significant outcome, providing clarity after decades of uncertainty. The case became part of a broader initiative supporting cold case reviews and forensic advancements, highlighting how modern techniques could restore names to those long unidentified. Case 6. January 24, 2006, Orlando, Florida. 24-year-old Jennifer Kess was reported missing after she failed to arrive at work and could not be reached by phone. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when her usual morning communication did not occur and her phone went unanswered. Family members immediately raised concerns. Within days, attention turned toward unidentified individuals later seen on limited security footage connected to her vehicle. Jennifer was last known to be at her condominium the night before her disappearance after returning from a weekend trip. She spoke with family members and her boyfriend that evening and made no indication of travel plans. The following morning, she did not send her customary message before work and did not appear at her job. Her employer contacted her parents, who attempted to reach her without success. They traveled to Orlando and found her condominium appearing as though she had left for work, with personal items still inside. Her car, phone, purse, and keys were missing. Police were contacted, and a missing person report was filed. Initial checks of nearby areas produced no immediate results, but the circumstances did not align with a voluntary absence. Jennifer was a finance professional who had recently purchased her first condominium. She maintained regular routines, consistent communication with family, and a structured work schedule. Her social circle was stable, and she was known to be cautious and organized. The condominium complex where she lived was undergoing renovations at the time, resulting in frequent access by construction and maintenance workers. Residents had previously reported discomfort related to some encounters in shared areas. Jennifer's predictable habits and stable lifestyle made her disappearance highly unusual. Her environment and routine became central to early investigative focus. It would take only hours for her normal morning pattern to be recognized as a significant warning sign. 2 days after her disappearance, Jennifer's vehicle was found parked at a nearby apartment complex approximately 1 mile from her residence. Security footage showed an unidentified individual exiting the car and walking away, but the person's face was obscured. The footage provided limited physical details and no definitive identification. Investigators searched the vehicle but found no conclusive forensic evidence. Early investigative opportunities were constrained by missing or incomplete security recordings from Jennifer's condominium complex. Multiple theories were considered, including abduction near her car and targeted contact by someone familiar with the property. Despite extensive searches and assistance from federal agencies, no arrest was made. Years later, advances in forensic review prompted renewed examination of preserved evidence. Previously untested DNA material was analyzed using modern techniques. Investigators revisited surveillance footage and applied AI-assisted enhancement tools to clarify physical features. The suspect pool was narrowed as outdated leads were reassessed and eliminated. The investigation shifted from a dormant status to an active review, with law enforcement confirming that new evidence had provided a more focused direction. While no arrest had been announced, officials stated that the case was no longer considered cold. Jennifer's family pursued civil action to obtain investigative records, resulting in the release of extensive documentation. The case was later transferred to state-level investigators for continued review. As of the most recent update, the investigation remained active, with authorities continuing to analyze evidence and seek information. No charges had been filed, and Jennifer's whereabouts remained unknown. The case continued to be referenced as an example of unresolved disappearances, involving delayed evidence review and evolving investigative methods. Case 7. May 20, 1975, Concord, New Hampshire. 21-year-old Judith Lord was found deceased inside her apartment, while her infant son cried in a nearby room. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when rent collectors received no response at her door despite hearing a child inside. Entry into the apartment led to the discovery of her body. Within days, attention turned toward individuals who had close access to her apartment in the hours before her death. The case began when the operations manager of the Concord Gardens apartment complex arrived to collect overdue rent. After hearing an infant crying and receiving no response to repeated knocks, he entered the unit to check on the child's safety. Inside, he discovered Judith lying on a bed, unresponsive, with clear signs of violence. Her infant son was located unharmed in a crib in an adjacent room. Police were contacted immediately and secured the scene. Investigators documented evidence of a struggle, including disturbed furnishings and household items displaced from their original positions. An alarm clock frozen at a specific time suggested the confrontation occurred during the night. The apartment was processed as a homicide scene, and an autopsy was ordered. Judith had been born in 1953 and raised in a large family before later settling in New Hampshire. She married Gregory Lord Sr. while he was serving in the military, and the couple lived overseas for a period following their marriage. After returning to the United States, they settled in Concord with their young son. Judith was known to neighbors as friendly and involved in the apartment community. In the weeks before her death, Her marriage had become strained, and she had recently separated from her husband. She had adjusted her work and daily routines during this period. Her role as a young mother and her regular habits placed her within a predictable environment. It would take only days for her private life to become central to a homicide investigation. The autopsy confirmed that Judith died from strangulation and showed evidence consistent with sexual assault. Investigators recovered hairs and biological material from the scene, along with items indicating a violent struggle. Early attention focused on several individuals, including Judith's estranged husband and nearby neighbors. Her husband provided an alibi and was later cleared. Another neighbor was eliminated due to lack of evidence. Ernest Theodore Gable, who lived in an adjoining apartment and shared a wall with Judith, emerged as a person of interest. Witnesses reported that Judith had expressed fear of him. Investigators also located his fingerprints on the exterior of her windows. However, hair comparison tests conducted at the time produced results that incorrectly excluded him, halting further action. Decades later, the case was reopened following acknowledgement by federal authorities that many forensic hair analyses from the 1970s were unreliable. Investigators re-examined the evidence using modern techniques. Preserved biological material from the crime scene was submitted for DNA testing. In 2025, the results conclusively identified Ernest Theodore Gable as the source of the male DNA recovered. The corrected forensic findings aligned with early suspicions that had never been resolved. The renewed analysis established a direct link between Gable and the crime, resolving questions that had persisted for nearly 50 years. By the time the identification was made, Gable had been deceased for decades, having died in California in 1987. Authorities confirmed that criminal charges would have been pursued had he been alive. The case was formally closed with Gable named as the responsible party. For Judith's family, the conclusion provided long-delayed clarity about what had happened in 1975. Investigators emphasized that the outcome demonstrated the consequences of flawed forensic methods and the importance of re-examining cold cases with updated technology. Case 8. December 24, 2004, Connecticut. 51-year-old Robert Kavanaugh failed to return home from work and was reported missing by his family. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when repeated attempts to contact him were unsuccessful. His absence was uncharacteristic and raised immediate concern. Within days, attention turned toward his vehicle and growing worries about his safety and well-being. Robert was last known to have left work on December 24 and did not arrive home as expected. When family members were unable to reach him, they contacted local authorities to report him missing. Police gathered information regarding his last known movements, employment schedule, and vehicle description. A missing person alert was issued that included details of his pickup truck, which investigators believed could be central to locating him. Early search efforts focused on areas along his usual travel routes and places he was known to frequent. Despite these efforts, no confirmed sightings were reported. The lack of physical evidence or witnesses complicated initial progress and left investigators with limited direction. Robert was married and a father of 4, living what appeared to be a stable family life. He had worked as a long-haul truck driver before transitioning into a career as a correctional officer in Connecticut. In the period leading up to his disappearance, he had been experiencing personal and mental health struggles that were not widely known. Outside his immediate circle. These challenges were later considered during the investigation as authorities assessed possible explanations for his disappearance. Despite concerns, there was no indication he intended to leave his family or abandon his responsibilities. His background and routine suggested his absence was unusual and warranted continued investigation. In the years following his disappearance, law enforcement maintained the case as open but unresolved. Community members and advocacy organizations assisted by offering a reward for information that could lead to answers. Over time, however, public attention diminished and no new leads emerged. The case remained unsolved for more than 2 decades, with investigators periodically reviewing available information. Without evidence indicating criminal involvement or a clear trail to follow, the investigation produced no definitive conclusions. Robert's disappearance became one of many long-term missing person cases with unanswered questions. On October 5, 2025, human remains were discovered in Mansfield Hollow Lake by local emergency responders. A subsequent search led to the recovery of a submerged vehicle matching the description of Robert's pickup truck. Items found inside the vehicle supported the possibility that it belonged to him. DNA analysis conducted the following month confirmed the remains were Robert Kavanaugh. The discovery established what had happened after years of uncertainty and provided factual resolution to the case. With the identification confirmed, authorities officially closed the missing person investigation. Family members were informed and later held a private funeral. While the discovery ended decades of searching, it also renewed discussions about mental health awareness and support. Investigators noted that the case underscored the importance of continued attention to unresolved disappearances. For Robert's family, the conclusion brought clarity after many years without answers. Case 9. February 19, 1971, Lake Panasoffkee, Florida. An unidentified young woman was found deceased beneath a highway overpass after being discovered partially submerged near the roadway. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared with evidence of strangulation and extended exposure to the elements. The condition of the remains indicated she had been there for weeks. Within days, the victim became known publicly as Little Miss Panasoffkee. The body was discovered by 2 teenage hitchhikers who noticed a figure beneath the overpass and contacted authorities. Responding officers documented significant decomposition consistent with prolonged exposure to water and weather. A man's belt was found fastened around the victim's neck, indicating death by strangulation. Investigators estimated the killing had occurred several weeks earlier. Clothing and personal items were recovered, including jewelry and a wristwatch, suggesting the victim may have been married. A fractured rib led investigators to believe force had been applied during the assault. Despite thorough processing of the scene, no identification documents were found, and no witnesses could be located. Early investigative conclusions confirmed homicide but provided no clear suspect or identity. The victim was estimated to be between 17 and 24 years old, approximately 5 feet 2 inches tall, with dark hair and brown eyes. Her clothing consisted of green and patterned garments that were cataloged for identification purposes. Jewelry worn at the time of death was preserved and photographed. Despite these details, no missing person reports matched her description. She had never been reported missing, which significantly hindered identification efforts. Over time, she remained known only by her case nickname, with no confirmed ties to family, employment, or residence. Decades passed with no name assigned, and her case remained unresolved despite periodic reviews. In February 1986, the body was exhumed to allow for additional forensic examination as technology advanced. Facial reconstructions were created and distributed in 1971, and again decades later, but neither effort resulted in identification. Investigators continued to preserve evidence and re-examine records as methods improved. The case remained active in name, but produced no definitive leads. Law enforcement revisited the file multiple times, applying updated forensic approaches as they became available. Each review confirmed homicide but failed to resolve the victim's identity or circumstances. In 2025, investigators employed modern fingerprint analysis technology to re-examine prints recovered from the remains. These prints were compared against historical arrest records using advanced matching systems. The comparison produced a match to a 1970 arrest record under the name Maureen Lou Minor Rowan. Further verification confirmed her identity. The breakthrough did not rely on DNA, but on technological advancements in latent fingerprint processing. The identification established her birth in 1949 and confirmed she had lived in Florida prior to her death. Following identification, authorities notified surviving family members and updated official records. Investigators confirmed Maureen Rowan had never been reported missing, explaining why the case remained unresolved for more than 5 decades. The investigation into her death remained open, with renewed focus on reconstructing her final movements and associations during 1970 and 1971. Officials issued public appeals for information from anyone who knew Maureen or had contact with her during that period. While her identity was restored, the circumstances of her death continued to be examined. Case 10, 2013, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Melissa Zimmerman was found injured following an indecent assault after being discovered by a passerby. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when evidence from her medical examination was collected but not processed for testing. The absence of timely forensic analysis prevented immediate investigative progress. Within years, the case was officially closed without charges, leaving the assault unresolved. The incident occurred after Melissa became separated from her group while attending an event. She was approached by an unknown man who offered assistance with a cell phone. When the device did not function, the man pushed her into a ditch and restrained her. Emergency services were contacted after a passerby found her injured and alerted authorities. First responders transported her to a medical facility, where an assault examination was conducted. Biological evidence was collected and forwarded to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. At the time, investigators documented the assault and initiated a case file. However, no immediate suspect was identified, and the evidence collected was not subjected to forensic testing. Little information about Melissa's personal background was released publicly. Investigators established that she had been out socially prior to the assault and became separated from companions shortly before the incident. Following discovery, she received medical treatment and cooperated with the initial response process. The examination generated an assault kit intended to support identification of the perpetrator. Beyond these immediate steps, the case record contained limited contextual detail. Her separation from her group and the absence of witnesses narrowed early investigative avenues. The medical examination became the primary source of potential evidence linking an offender to the crime. Despite the seriousness of the assault, the evidence collected remained untested for years. The case was later marked as closed, with records indicating the victim did not wish to proceed. This notation effectively halted further investigative action. Over time, the lack of forensic testing became a central issue. The assault kit remained in storage as part of a broader backlog. The discrepancy between the case closure and the unused evidence drew later scrutiny. The absence of testing meant no suspect could be identified, and the case remained dormant despite the existence of preserved biological material. In 2024, a separate criminal investigation led authorities to collect a DNA sample from Mohammed Bulli. That sample was entered into forensic systems and compared against evidence from unresolved cases. The comparison produced a match with the biological material preserved from Melissa's 2013 assault kit. Following confirmation, prosecutors reopened the case and reviewed the long-delayed evidence. Charges were filed linking Bulli to the assault, formally reviving a case that had remained inactive for more than a decade. In November 2025, a jury found Mohammed Bulli guilty of charges related to the assault. He was sentenced to a lengthy term of imprisonment. The conviction concluded the revived case and highlighted systemic issues related to untested assault kits. Prosecutors emphasized institutional efforts to address evidence backlogs and prevent similar delays. The case was cited as an example of how deferred forensic testing can delay accountability, even when evidence exists.
In August 2012, the badly hurt body of Camille Turner was found in a dark alley close to her fancy apartment in New York City. At first, people thought it was just a random attack. But soon, it became clear that something much darker was behind it. The police investigation revealed a dangerous connection between Elena Davenport, the strong and well-known wife of rich real estate owner Frederick Davenport, and the woman who had become her secret enemy. At exactly 8:45 in the morning, police officers arrived at the big, beautiful home of Frederick and Elena Davenport. The house was a symbol of money, power, and high social standing. By 9:10, Elena was in handcuffs, being taken to a police car while neighbors and reporters watched in shock. She was charged with trying to kill someone. The victim was someone no one expected, Camille Turner. Her name had never been linked to Elena's perfect world, until now. Camille had been found the night before, left in an alley 2 miles from a fancy restaurant in Manhattan. Her body was covered in blood, and her heartbeat was faint, but she survived. By August 8th, she was awake in the hospital and quietly told detectives the name of the person who had hurt her, Elena Davenport. On January 20th, 2013, after 6 months of deep investigation, the lawyers said they had enough proof to charge Elena with trying to commit first-degree murder. People were shocked. Why would a woman known for her money, power, and perfect marriage try to kill someone? The answer was in a 30-year lie that had finally come apart. Elena was the type of woman other wives wanted to be. Husbands were careful not to upset her. She lived with full confidence, like a queen in a world she built herself. Power was everything to her. She wore it, walked in it, lived by it. Her house was not just big, it showed her strength. Every polished floor, every sparkling light, every piece of art was picked to show perfection. Everyone working in her house knew not to speak unless spoken to. They followed her orders exactly, knowing that even a crooked bedsheet or wrong glass placement could make her angry. Her husband Frederick was the perfect match for her. He had money, success, and he listened to her. After 30 years of marriage, he knew that Elena always won. She chose what he ate, what he wore, who he met, and how he lived. She made sure he never looked at other women. She believed no one could compete with her. At parties, she quietly made fun of women who lost their husbands to affairs. She believed men only strayed when wives became weak. She believed she had built a marriage that no one could ruin. She was wrong. On July 8, 2012, Elena came home from a fancy charity event, feeling proud and admired. She entered her room, took off her diamond earrings, and placed them in a soft-lined box. Everything seemed perfect. Then, her husband's phone rang. Frederick was in the shower. His phone, usually kept safe, buzzed loudly on the nightstand. It was a private number, and it rang 3 times. The calls felt too personal, too urgent. A voicemail followed. Elena looked at the phone. Her hand hovered over it. She had never needed to check his phone. He was her husband. He belonged to her. But this time felt different. She pressed play. A woman's voice played in the quiet room. Soft. Serious. Familiar. Freddie, I cannot keep waiting. You said we would tell her. Please call me. It was a voice full of hope and need. A voice that had no place in Elena's world. She stood still. She did not move or blink. The only sound was water running in the shower. Her husband had a lover. But it was not a short fling. It was something deeper. This woman wanted more. She expected more. Elena's mind raced. She had a problem, and she needed answers. Who was this woman? How long had this been happening? How did Elena not notice? She did not ask Frederick. She did not cry. She wanted control. And to take control, she needed information. By July 15, 2012, she had all the answers. She hired a private investigator. He was expensive, but she did not care. She did not want to know how he worked, only what he found. And what he found destroyed her. It was not a new affair. It did not last months or even just a few years. Frederick had been in a relationship with Camille Turner for 16 years. 16 years. Elena sat at her big desk, the investigator's report in front of her. The photos, the receipts, the documents, all clear proof. Each page hurt more than the last. Camille was younger than Elena, not by much, but enough. She was in her early 40s. She was beautiful, but not flashy. She worked in an art gallery. She smiled in a way that looked real. She was gentle, not powerful. She was not rich. She was not chasing attention. She was not Elena. Frederick had not just cheated with Camille. He had a life with her. There were hotel stays, private dinners, beach weekends at a house Elena never knew about. There were gifts, letters, plane tickets, and even a credit card with Camille's name. For 16 years, Frederick had loved another woman. And the worst part? He was not afraid of losing Elena. He was afraid of losing Camille. Elena looked at the pictures. Her heart beat slowly. Her marriage, 30 years of it, was a lie. She had thought she was in control. She had believed Frederick was scared of losing her. She believed she had full control, that Frederick would never leave her, that he was only hers. But the truth came in the most painful way. Frederick had never really been hers. Camille Turner was never a danger to Elena, not in her world. Elena moved among people who held power through wealth, family names, and influence. Camille was different. She had no powerful name, no famous background. She lived quietly, working in an art gallery, far from the luxury Elena knew. She had fallen in love with a man who already belonged to someone else. But what hurt Elena the most was that Camille had not stolen Frederick. He had gone to her willingly, happily, without shame. For 16 years, while Elena hosted parties and smiled for photos, Frederick had been loving another woman. It was not just an affair. It was real love. And now, Camille wanted more. On August 1st, 2012, on a Wednesday night, Elena sat alone in her study. A dim light from the laptop screen lit her face. For days, she had gone through financial records, old emails, secret bank activity. Frederick never thought she would find it. But she did. She found an email from Camille, sent on July 29th. It was not the message of a woman sneaking around. It was from a woman who believed the man was truly hers. Camille talked about promises, about a future, about the time he said they would finally be together. She wanted a full life with him. Elena read that message again and again. Each word felt like a cut. Camille was not scared to ask for Frederick, because she knew she already had him. At that moment, Elena made a decision. Camille had lived in the shadows for too long. But she would not survive what Elena had planned. Elena never let emotions control her. Emotions were for weak people, those who cried and begged unfaithful husbands to stay. Elena had spent 30 years making sure she would never become one of them. So she planned. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen. She greeted Frederick as if nothing had changed. She told him she needed a short break. A weekend trip to their lake house. She acted calm. By the afternoon, she had packed her bags, gave instructions to the house staff, and even called a friend to talk about her retreat. Everything was set. By 5 o'clock in the evening, Frederick believed she had left. But Elena was watching. She had hired someone to follow Camille. Camille lived a simple life. She had routines. At 7:45 that evening, Camille walked into her favorite restaurant. It was a small place, quiet and cozy, hidden in a calm part of the city. Elena parked across the street. She did not eat. She did not drink. She only watched the door. At 9:12 p.m., Camille stepped out, walking alone. She looked peaceful, unaware of any danger. Elena followed her. The night was warm, the streets full of city noise. Camille walked slowly, not knowing what waited behind her. The first hit came fast. Direct. Planned. Elena always believed if something needed to be done, it should be done properly. Camille staggered. Her eyes filled with confusion. Her body failed her before her mind could understand. The second blow came harder. Straight to the head. Camille collapsed. Her body hit the pavement with a heavy sound. Blood began to spread under her. Dark and silent. Elena stood over her, looking down. This woman had taken something that never belonged to her. The world around them went on, cars passed, people laughed, restaurant doors opened and closed, but no one saw. No one stopped. Elena walked away. Calm and proud. She believed it was over. She believed Camille would never take anything again. The ground was cold beneath Camille. The night wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Blood pooled beside her head, deep red on the gray street. Time passed. The city moved on. People walked by. No one noticed her body, still breathing, but only just. At 4:27 a.m., a man passed by. His clothes were torn, his shoes old. He was hungry, tired, and lost in his thoughts. Then he saw her. A shape on the pavement. He almost kept walking. She looked lifeless. But then he heard it. A quiet breath. Soft. Barely there. She was alive. By 4:32 a.m., he was at a payphone. His voice shook. He told the police he had found a woman in an alley behind Morton's Bistro. He did not know who she was or what had happened. Only that she was still breathing. At 4:45 a.m., the ambulance arrived. The medics worked quickly. Their hands moved fast, their voices calm. They checked her wounds. The cut on her head. The bruises on her body. They put her on a stretcher, secured her, and checked her heart. By 5:12 a.m., she was on her way to St. Luke's Hospital. Her heartbeat was weak, but steady. At 7:40 a.m., Camille Turner opened her eyes. Her vision was cloudy. The lights above her were too bright. Machines beeped around her. A nurse stood nearby, gentle but distant. Camille was alive. But she was not safe. Her memory was broken. Pain. Darkness. Then, Elena's face. By August 6, 2012, at 10:22 a.m., Camille turned to the detective at her bedside and whispered the name. Elena. The name Davenport caused a wave of silence in the room. The officer's face did not change, but something in his body language showed understanding, like a missing piece had been found. At 2:15 in the afternoon, a warrant was issued for Elena's arrest. By 2:45, police cars entered the long private driveway of the Davenport estate. At 3 p.m., Elena Davenport, once known for power and control, was taken out of her front door in handcuffs. Cameras flashed. The world watched. Everything she had built fell apart in seconds. Elena's arrest shocked everyone. For years, she was the woman who gossiped about others, mocked broken marriages, and judged women who lost their husbands. Now, she was the story being told. By August 7, 2012, her name filled the headlines. Famous businessman's wife arrested for attempted murder. News reporters discussed every detail. People in her social circle whispered. Friends stayed away. By August 10th, the media focused on Frederick Davenport. He had spent years building an image, the loving husband, the powerful company leader, the perfect man. But now, people saw who he truly was. He was not caught between two women, he was the cause of the disaster. Clients left Davenport and company. Investors pulled out. Business deals were canceled. By September 2, 2012, Frederick was forced to quit as CEO. For the first time in his life, he had nothing. But the biggest moment was still coming, the trial. On November 15th, jury selection began. The media called it one of the biggest scandals of the decade. The courtroom was full. Reporters fought to capture every angle. The prosecutors wasted no time. They showed everything, How Elena planned the attack, how she hired a private investigator, how she created her alibi. But the strongest proof came from the witness stand, Camille Turner. She was supposed to be gone, but she had survived. And now, her voice was the most powerful in the room. On December 5th, Elena sat in court. Her face was calm, her hands neatly folded as Camille told the story. Each word reminded Elena that she had failed. Camille had not disappeared. She had lived. The defense tried to claim that Elena had lost her mind, that she snapped under stress, and it was not planned. But the prosecutors proved that wrong. On January 20th, 2013, the jury reached a decision. Guilty of attempted murder. Elena showed no emotion, but her hands tightened when the judge gave the sentence, 26 years. By January 22nd, Elena was sent to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. The woman who once controlled everything was now an ordinary prisoner. By February 2013, the whispers began to fade. News channels moved on. But for the three people at the center, Elena, Frederick, and Camille, there was no moving on. Frederick felt the full weight of his actions. He had spent a lifetime building a name, a business, and a false image. He thought he could have it all, a wife who polished his public life, a mistress who gave him what he wanted, and a peaceful balance where neither would find out. But he had been wrong. By March 2013, Davenport and Company was no longer his. The board forced him out. Investors left. His respected name became a joke. People he once called friends now ignored him. No more invitations. No more flattery. By June 2013, he sold the mansion. It was no longer a home, only a reminder of what he had ruined. The garden was unkempt. The floors were walked by strangers. The house, like his marriage, had always been a false show of control. And now, it belonged to someone else. For the first time in many years, he was completely alone. And in that silence, he finally understood he was never in control. Camille Turner also disappeared. By April 2013, people had lost interest in her story. But she had already made her choice. She did not want to be the woman who survived Elena Davenport's rage. She wanted peace. She sold her apartment, deleted her social media, cut ties with anyone who reminded her of that life. By May, she was gone. No goodbye. No address. Just silence. Some said they saw her in a small town near the ocean. That she changed her name. That she started fresh. But no one could confirm it. She escaped with her life, but not without scars. No matter how far she ran, she would always remember that alley. The pain. The cold street. The feeling of death being close. She never talked about it again. She simply disappeared, leaving others to tell the story without her. Elena now sat in a cold gray cell. The silence around her louder than anything she had ever heard. By August 2013, she knew the sounds of prison well. Metal trays, soft voices, faraway laughter from women who had accepted their fate. But Elena had not accepted hers. She had lived her whole life above others. Now, she lived below them all. By December, she stopped hoping for special treatment. The guards were not afraid of her. The inmates did not care about her. The name Elena Davenport had no meaning here. She had lost everything. But not in the way she expected. When she entered that courtroom, she thought her greatest loss would be her freedom. But that loss happened long before. Long before the arrest, long before the trial. She had lost Frederick years ago. That was her biggest fall. The one that hurt the most. By early 2014, no one spoke about her anymore. The scandal was over. People had found new stories. Frederick had disappeared. Camille had vanished. Elena was living a life she never thought possible. But the most painful truth waited outside the prison walls. In the same city where Elena once ruled, women still met for lunch, still talked about cheating, still judged each other. And sometimes, her name was mentioned. But not with envy. With pity. By March 2014, the same women she used to mock now felt sorry for her. Because Elena Davenport was never special. She was just another woman who believed a man belonged to her. And now, she had all the time in the world to think about it. Imagine finding out a terrible family secret that makes a preacher attack his own father in anger. A painful betrayal destroys everything he believes in. A lifetime of trust ends in just one moment. This is the story of a man who valued his faith and family more than anything else until a painful truth changed his entire life. Pastor Elijah King, age 42, was a well-known preacher in his town in Florida. People loved him for his powerful speeches about faith, family, and strong values. Many people came to his church because they believed he was a good and honest man. He was fully dedicated to both his church and his home. His wife, Naomi King, age 38, was kind, calm, and respectful. She helped Elijah lead a good life. She took care of their 5 children, Abigail, 16, Elijah Jr., 14, Noah, 12, Sophie, 9, and Micah, 6. Naomi was also active in the community. She ran Sunday school, planned charity events, and helped Elijah in his church work. Together, they seemed like the perfect family. Elijah's father, Deacon Henry King, age 65, was a respected elder in the church. For many years, Henry served in the church and guided others. He raised Elijah to be a man of strong faith, to care for his family, and to follow the Bible closely. Elijah often thanked his father during his church talks, saying that Henry was the one who helped build their strong family. Their home was always full of energy. Abigail was smart and liked studying. She often helped with church programs for young people. Elijah Jr. was quiet but helpful, especially at church. Noah was curious and playful. Sophie was kind and always wanted to help. Micah, the youngest, was loved by everyone and still too young to understand the world's problems. Every Sunday, the family had dinner at Henry's house. These dinners started with prayers and reading from the Bible, usually led by Henry. After that, they talked about church and local events. Elijah felt proud during these times. He saw them as proof of the family's love and shared faith. One evening during dinner, Abigail spoke with excitement. She said, "For a school project about our family history, I thought we could all take a DNA test. It might help us find out where we came from or maybe discover relatives we never met." Her younger siblings, EJ, Noah, Sophie, and Micah, were happy and made fun guesses about being related to royalty or having a hidden past. Elijah smiled and said, "That sounds like a fun idea. We can all do it together." But across the table, Naomi's smile faded. She reached for her glass of water, and her hands were shaking. "I am not sure, Abby," she said quietly. "These tests are not always right. They can feel too private." She looked at Henry, who sat silently with a serious face. Elijah did not take her words seriously. He said, "Come on, Naomi, it is just a family activity. It will help with Abigail's project." He held Naomi's hand and gave her a comforting smile. "We have nothing to worry about." Naomi looked at him with a strange expression, then slowly nodded. "Okay," she said softly. The children were excited as Elijah ordered the DNA kits on his phone. Henry gave a small smile and sipped his coffee without saying anything. A few weeks later, the results came. Abigail called everyone to the computer. Elijah opened the website, and the family looked at the details with curiosity, learning about their ancestors and distant relatives. But then Elijah noticed something strange. He looked closely at the screen and said, "Wait, this says I am not the biological father of the children." He laughed awkwardly. "This must be wrong, probably a mistake in the system." Naomi froze. Her hand tightened around the chair. Henry looked at Elijah but said nothing. His jaw was tight. "I will contact the company," Elijah said calmly. "They probably got the information wrong." He stood up, kissed Naomi's head, and said, "Do not worry. I will fix it." In the next few days, Elijah called the DNA company. He explained the mistake and asked them to check again. But when the company replied, Elijah was shocked. "We checked the results 3 times," the person on the phone said. "There is no mistake. The children's biological father is not you. But the DNA shows a strong match with another close relative who also submitted a sample." Elijah felt like the world had stopped. He asked them again, but the answer did not change. He ended the call and sat still, heartbroken. There was only one possible match: his father Henry. Elijah remembered small things: how often Henry visited, how Naomi acted quietly around him, and how Naomi did not want to take the DNA test. Now, it all seemed clear and terrifying. That evening, Elijah came home with the printed DNA results in his hand. Naomi was folding clothes in the living room. Elijah threw the papers on the table. His face was full of anger and shock. "Explain this," he said in a cold, sharp voice. Naomi looked at the papers, then at Elijah. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaking. Elijah shouted, "These DNA results say I am not the father of my children. But they also say that someone from our own family is. Do you want to explain that?" Her face turned pale as she held the back of the chair to keep from falling. "There must be a mistake," she said in a shaking voice. "That cannot be true." Elijah leaned in, his voice getting louder. "Do not lie to me, Naomi. I spoke with the company. They checked the results again. There is no mistake. So I will ask you one more time. Explain this." Naomi began to cry. Tears ran down her face as she dropped into the chair. Between sobs, she revealed a secret she had kept hidden for years. She said that early in their marriage, Henry had forced her into a sexual relationship. His power and control made her feel helpless, and the abuse had gone on for a long time. "All 5 children," she whispered through her tears. "They are all his. I never knew how to stop it. I did not want to break you." Elijah took a step back. The room began to spin. The woman he trusted most and the man he looked up to had both destroyed his life in the worst way. He stormed out of the house, filled with pain, anger, and confusion. That night, Elijah sat alone in his car. Naomi's confession pressed down on him like a heavy weight. His thoughts were dark and confusing. Everything he believed in, his faith, his family, his church, was now broken. His children, who had brought him so much joy, were not his. The woman he loved had been living in fear. And the man who taught him about God had done something unforgivable. Emotions overwhelmed him: shock, sadness, and then a deep anger that made it hard to breathe. He grabbed the steering wheel tightly. His hands turned white, and his face was soaked in tears as he screamed, "Why? How could they do this to me?" He hit the dashboard again and again. He drove for hours through the quiet streets of his town. Memories of family dinners and church sermons filled his mind, but now they all felt like lies. As the sun began to rise, Elijah parked by a lake. The still water reflected the morning light. In that silence, his sadness turned into cold anger. Forgiveness no longer seemed possible. The betrayal was too painful. The only thing Elijah could think about was justice. He believed Naomi and Henry had to face punishment for what they had done. He started making a plan. His thoughts became sharp and clear. He had preached about forgiveness all his life. But now, he felt only the need for revenge. He kept thinking about Naomi's confession. Every word made his anger stronger. When Elijah returned home, he was calm but quiet. He did not say much to Naomi, who had cried all night. He could not look at his children without feeling heartbreak. He knew they were not his by blood, but he still loved them deeply. That love only added to his pain. The evening was heavy and silent. Naomi sat alone in the living room. Her face was pale and stained with tears. She had waited all day, scared of what might happen next. Elijah walked in without a word. His eyes were empty. He was hiding a kitchen knife in his hand. Naomi looked up, her voice shaking. "Elijah, I know you are hurt, but we can." He cut her off. "Do not try to fix this. You have destroyed everything." Naomi stood, crying again. "I was trapped. I never wanted this. I never meant to hurt you." Elijah laughed bitterly. You did not want to hurt me? You let him destroy our marriage. He fathered our children. You let him sit at our table. You lied to me every single day. Naomi dropped to her knees, crying hard. Please, Elijah. I love you. We can fix this. Fix this? Elijah shouted. His rage exploded. This cannot be fixed. You made me live a lie. Now you must pay. With one fast motion, he stabbed her in the chest. Naomi gasped, her eyes full of shock. Elijah's face showed no pity. He pulled the knife out and stabbed her again in the stomach. The room filled with the awful sound of tearing flesh and Naomi's cries of pain. She tried to crawl away, her blood spreading across the floor. But Elijah did not stop. Each stab came from years of hurt and shame. You should have told me the truth, he shouted. You should have stopped him. When Naomi stopped moving, her body lifeless on the floor, Elijah stood up, breathing heavily. The fire inside him did not calm, it just moved to the next target. There was one more person who had to be punished. The night air was still as Elijah drove to Henry's house. His grip on the wheel was tight. His thoughts were full of pain and revenge. He could still see Naomi's body in his mind. He felt like he had already lost everything. In his heart, justice now meant blood. He burst through Henry's front door. Henry was sitting at the table with a cup of tea, reading his Bible. He looked up, confused and nervous. Elijah, what are you doing here? Elijah did not answer. He threw the crumpled DNA papers onto the table. Explain this, he said, his voice low and shaking with anger. Henry looked at the papers, then back at Elijah. I do not know what this is, he said, clearly scared. Do not lie to me, Elijah snapped. His hands were shaking. You hurt Naomi for years. You are the father of my children, are you not? Henry stood, raising his hands to calm Elijah. Listen to me, son. It is not what you think. Stop lying. Elijah yelled. You destroyed my family. You are a monster. Before Henry could say anything more, Elijah rushed forward and stabbed him in the side. Henry screamed, stumbling back. Blood spread through his shirt as he tried to stay standing. But Elijah did not stop. He kept stabbing, again and again, letting out all the anger he had held for years. Henry collapsed too. Let me know when to continue or if this is the final part. Henry lay on the floor, shaking from pain, his strength fading quickly. You deserve to feel the pain you gave me, Elijah said, standing over him. Henry tried to move away, breathing in short, weak gasps, but his body could not respond. Elijah knelt beside him. His voice was cold and steady. This is for Naomi. This is for all the years of lies. This is for my children. Holding the knife tight, Elijah began to cut off Henry's manhood. Henry's screams filled the room. His body twisted in pain as blood spread across the floor. Elijah's face did not change. He focused only on the act of revenge. The pain became too much for Henry. His screams became softer. His body shook, then became still. He breathed one last, rough breath, and then there was silence. Elijah dropped the knife. It was now covered in blood. He took a few steps back, breathing hard. The air smelled of blood and death. The sounds of Henry's cries still echoed in his head. He stared at the lifeless body of the man he once called his father. But he felt no peace. No comfort. Only a deep, empty hole inside him where his faith and family once lived. Elijah walked out of the house, his clothes soaked in blood. He sat on the front porch. Soon, the quiet neighborhood turned into chaos as police arrived, responding to calls from frightened neighbors who had heard screams and crashing noises. The officers, with weapons ready, moved carefully toward the house. But instead of a fight, they found Elijah sitting calmly on the porch. Blood covered his clothes. His Bible rested on his lap. Elijah looked up at them. His expression gave nothing away. It is done, he said quietly, raising his hands to surrender. God's justice has been served. The police quickly handcuffed him. They looked disturbed. Elijah did not resist as they led him to the patrol car. One officer went inside to check the house. What he saw was beyond anything he could imagine. Henry's body was on the floor, covered in deep stab wounds. His manhood was severed. Blood was everywhere. The signs of a violent struggle made the room feel like a nightmare. As they put Elijah in the back seat of the car, he turned to one officer. His voice was calm, almost like he was having a normal talk. "Naomi," he said, "you will find her at our house. She betrayed me too." The officers exchanged shocked looks. They realized they were dealing with something far worse. They rushed to Elijah's home. There, they found Naomi, just as Elijah had said. Her body was in the living room, dismembered and surrounded by signs of cold, planned violence. At the station, Elijah gave a full confession. His voice had no emotion. "She lied to me for years," he said. "And my father destroyed everything I believed in." They had to face the consequences. The investigators were stunned by how calmly Elijah explained the murders. When asked why he did it, he simply said, "They destroyed our family. I just finished what they started." News of the crime spread quickly. The town was shocked. Elijah King, once a respected preacher, had become a figure of fear. The violence, the betrayal, and his cold reaction left everyone speechless. His trial drew attention from across the country. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, curious citizens, and even people from Elijah's old church came to watch. Everyone wanted to see what would happen to the man who once preached love and peace. Elijah's lawyers said he had lost control because of the deep betrayal. They brought in doctors to explain how the truth about his children and his father's abuse had destroyed his mind. They said he acted like someone who had suffered more than anyone could handle. But the prosecutors focused on what Elijah had done. They said it was not just anger, it was a plan. They pointed out the way he killed his father, the knife wounds, and the terrible act of mutilation. They said no matter how bad the betrayal was, it could not excuse such cruelty. The jury took days to decide. They thought about what Elijah had gone through, but also about the terrible way he had responded. In the end, they found him guilty of 2 murders. The judge said the case was difficult, but he had no choice. He sentenced Elijah to life in prison without the chance of release. Elijah's children, now without both parents, were placed into foster care. Each of them struggled with the truth. The King family, once seen as holy and strong, had become a warning to others. A reminder that even the most faithful lives can be destroyed by secrets and lies. As Elijah was taken from the courtroom in chains, he held his Bible tightly. He whispered prayers to a God he still believed had guided him. But to the world, he had become a symbol of what happens when anger and betrayal take over. Elijah King's fall from trusted preacher to cold killer is a sad reminder of how hidden truths can break even the strongest people. It makes us wonder, was Elijah pushed too far, or did he choose a path no pain could excuse? If this story made you question everything, stay with us. Like and subscribe for more true crime stories that show the darkest sides of human nature. Dallas, Texas. August 10th, 2014. A peaceful, quiet neighborhood is suddenly filled with police. They close off a house on Maple Drive. Inside, officers find a scene that does not match the calm area outside. What looked like a normal love story has turned into a dark mess of lies, cheating, and finally, a killing. The truth behind it all will make you wonder if you really know the people around you. In the year 2000, Maria and David Thompson lived in Dallas. They looked like the perfect couple. Maria, who was 26, worked as a real estate agent. She had a warm, friendly personality and was very good at selling houses. She became one of the top agents in the city. David, who was 28, worked in investment banking. His job was hard, but he liked the challenge and always wanted to do better. They owned a big house in a rich neighborhood. They had expensive cars, threw fancy dinner parties, and seemed like the dream couple to their friends and neighbors. David's younger brother, Andrew, often visited their home. He was 24 and wanted to become a musician. Andrew had a relaxed, happy way about him. He was very different from David, who was serious and focused. Andrew liked music and followed his passion, even though he was not successful yet. He stayed positive and kept trying. Andrew would sometimes stay with Maria and David for weeks, especially when he had no music work or no place to stay. Over time, he became a regular part of their lives. At first, Maria and Andrew were just friendly. They talked about music, dreams, and everyday life. But slowly, their talks became more private. They started to share personal thoughts and feelings. When David was not home, they spent more time together. By 2005, their friendship had turned into something more. It became a secret, strong relationship. They knew it was wrong, but the excitement of hiding it made it hard to stop. They met in secret places so no one would see them. Sometimes it was a hotel far away. Other times it was in Andrew's car, parked somewhere quiet. They sent secret messages to each other. They made sure David never found out. As time passed, the relationship between Maria and Andrew grew stronger. They missed each other deeply when they were apart. The risk of being found out made it feel even more exciting. Even though they knew it could all fall apart, they could not end it. In 2007, Andrew started asking Maria to leave David. He was tired of hiding and living like he was doing something wrong. He wanted a real life with Maria, where they could be together without secrets. But Maria felt confused. She loved Andrew deeply, but she was used to the life she had with David. She liked the safety, comfort, and respect that came with it. Letting go of all that felt too hard. She felt stuck between two different lives and could not fully choose either one. By 2012, their secret started to fall apart. The excitement of the affair was fading. Reality started to take over. Both of them knew it could not last much longer. Maria became more distant. She was scared that someone might find out. Andrew, however, grew angry. He could not understand why Maria would not leave David. Their arguments became more frequent. The love that once felt strong now felt filled with doubt and stress. In May 2014, David, who had always been unsure about Andrew's visits, decided to take a step. He had noticed small changes in Maria. The way she smiled at her phone. The sudden late-night work meetings. The quiet phone calls she tried to hide. David hired a private investigator to find out the truth. For several weeks, the investigator followed Maria and took notes. On June 10, 2014, he gave David a folder. Inside were photos and text messages. All of them showed what David feared most. Maria was in a relationship with Andrew. The betrayal was clear. David felt a deep anger, stronger than anything he had ever felt. But he stayed calm. He thanked the investigator and began planning what he would do next. On June 15, 2014, David faced Maria. It was a warm evening. Maria had just come home from one of her so-called meetings. She was surprised to see David waiting in the living room. The folder sat on the table in front of him. David looked calm, but his eyes were intense. He told Maria to sit down. Then, he slowly showed her the pictures one by one. As Maria looked at them, her face lost color. She tried to deny everything, saying the pictures were fake. But the proof was too strong. David then showed her the printed text messages. Each one made it clearer. Maria broke down. She begged for forgiveness. She said the affair meant nothing and that she still loved David. But David did not care. His trust in her was completely broken. He listened but said nothing. After many hours of heavy talk, David stood up, looked at Maria one last time, and left the room. He never raised his voice or cried. But Maria could tell he was not the same person anymore. In the next few days, David's thoughts were filled with anger and revenge. He did not want to act without thinking. He wanted to do something, but he wanted to do it smartly. He began searching online about how people had committed crimes without getting caught. He read many articles, watched videos, and even downloaded books about how the criminal mind works. By June 20th, 2014, David had a full plan. He did not just want to end Maria's life. He wanted Andrew to suffer too. David planned to kill Maria and make it look like Andrew was guilty. He believed that if he thought about every small detail, he could get away with it. David was careful. He planned everything step by step. David started by gathering items that could make Andrew look guilty. He placed some of Andrew's things inside the house, enough to suggest Andrew had been there. Then, he changed the messages between Maria and Andrew. He made it seem like they had a big fight. David knew the police would check those messages, and they would think Andrew had a reason to hurt Maria. By July 1st, 2014, David had everything ready. Now he just needed the right moment. On the outside, David looked calm and normal. He followed his routine every day. But inside, he was full of anger and waiting for the right time to make his move. On August 1st, 2014, David made his final decision. He told himself Maria had to die, and Andrew had to be blamed. This was not a sudden idea. It was a plan he had worked on for a long time, ever since he found out about the affair. David knew every step had to be exact. There could be no mistakes. He continued to place Andrew's DNA in the house. He put Andrew's hair and skin cells on objects in the kitchen and bedroom. At the same time, he cleaned everything he had touched. He wiped down all surfaces and got rid of anything that could link him to the crime. He also hid evidence for the police to find. One key item was a small vial of Andrew's blood that David had secretly taken. He kept it hidden in the back of the fridge. He knew once police found the blood, they would believe Andrew had done it. David marked August 9th, 2014, on his calendar. That was the day he planned to put everything into action. He had repeated the steps in his mind many times to make sure nothing could go wrong. On that day, he acted like it was just another Saturday. He went to work, smiled at his coworkers, and kept everything hidden under a calm face. But inside, he knew everything would change once the night came. That evening, David set things in place. He chose the kitchen to confront Maria. It was easy to clean, and it was a space where Maria felt safe. He poured 2 glasses of wine, one for him and one for Maria. But her glass had a strong sleeping drug in it. He had gotten the drug weeks earlier, pretending he needed it to help him sleep. David sat in the living room, pretending to watch television. Then he heard Maria's car in the driveway. It was 10 p.m. Maria came in looking tired, but she smiled softly. That smile faded when she saw David. She could feel something was not right. David gently told her that he wanted to forgive her and fix their marriage. He smiled and offered her the wine. Maria, feeling hopeful, accepted the glass. As she drank the wine, they talked. David acted kind and loving, making her believe everything would be fine. Maria relaxed, not knowing what was really happening. But after a few minutes, Maria started to feel sleepy. Her head felt heavy. David watched closely. He waited until her eyes started to close. Soon, Maria was unconscious. She leaned forward in her chair, completely out. David acted fast. He carried Maria's body to the garage. He had already set everything up there. He placed one of Andrew's guitar picks on the floor beside Maria's body. He wanted it to look like it fell during a fight. Then, he took the vial of Andrew's blood and carefully rubbed it on Maria's clothes. He made sure to put it in spots where the police would easily see it. David knew the blood would be the strongest piece of evidence. It would make the police believe Andrew was the killer. Next, David picked up a knife from the kitchen. It was one that Andrew often used for his artwork. It looked different from normal knives, which made it easier to connect to Andrew. Holding the knife, David stabbed Maria in the chest. He made sure the wound matched the shape and size of the blade. David had studied crime scenes. He knew how to make the injury look like it came from a real fight. Then he arranged Maria's body to look like she had tried to fight back. He knocked over a few things in the garage, pushed over a chair, and placed more of Andrew's things near her. David wanted the whole scene to tell a clear story. Andrew had attacked Maria in anger and killed her. Once everything looked the way he wanted, David cleaned up. He carefully wiped down anything he had touched. He removed every sign that could link him to the crime. He took his time, making sure that the only things left behind would point to Andrew. On August 10th, 2014, at 8 a.m., David called the police. His voice was shaky. He pretended to be full of fear and sadness as he told them he had found his wife dead in the garage. Police arrived quickly. The quiet neighborhood filled with flashing lights and crime tape. Officers began their investigation. David acted like the heartbroken husband. He answered every question. He told the detectives that Andrew had likely killed Maria. The evidence seemed to agree. The knife, the guitar pick, the blood, they all led back to Andrew. The police were convinced. They issued a warrant for Andrew's arrest. On August 11, 2014, Andrew was taken into custody. He was shocked and confused. Police told him he was being charged with Maria's murder. Andrew kept saying he was innocent, but the proof against him was strong. David stayed quiet. He watched as everything happened exactly how he had planned. That morning, police officers knocked on Andrew's apartment door. Andrew had just woken up. The sound of the knock echoed in the hallway. When he opened the door, still half asleep, he was met by serious-looking detectives. The officers told Andrew he was under arrest for killing Maria Thompson. He was shocked. He did not understand what was happening. They put handcuffs on him and walked him to the police car. His mind was spinning, trying to figure it all out. At the station, they put Andrew in an interrogation room. It was cold and plain, built to make even innocent people feel nervous. Two detectives sat across from him. Their faces showed no emotion. They began asking questions about his relationship with Maria. They asked very direct questions about the affair and about what he had done on the night of August 9th. Andrew answered honestly. He admitted he had been in a secret relationship with Maria, but he strongly denied hurting her. He said he loved her and would never do anything to harm her. But the detectives did not believe him. The evidence was too strong. They showed him the knife, the guitar pick, and the blood. It all seemed to point at him. Then they showed him the messages between him and Maria, messages that revealed their meetings and future plans. To the police, those messages looked like a reason for Andrew to commit the crime. Andrew felt hopeless. He could see how bad it all looked. But he also knew he was innocent. It hit him hard. Someone was framing him. But he had no idea who would do it or why. By August 15, 2014, the investigation started to turn. The detectives noticed something strange about David. He was too calm. At first, they thought he was just strong. But now, his behavior seemed suspicious. He had just lost his wife, but he did not act like a grieving husband. He had also been very willing to help them, which was unusual for someone in such pain. The detectives decided to take a closer look at David's story. They checked security camera footage from around the neighborhood to confirm where he was on the night of the murder. What they found surprised them. David's car was seen leaving the house several times that night. But he had told police he stayed home the entire time. This was a major discovery. If David had lied about being home, then something was wrong. The detectives asked themselves, why did David leave? Where did he go? They knew they needed answers. They also thought it was odd that David had been so helpful. In their experience, people who had gone through something terrible usually did not act that way. His behavior added to their doubts. They began to believe David might be hiding something. On August 18, 2014, using the new camera footage as a reason, the detectives got a warrant to search David's office and home. They believed he was involved in the murder, and now they were looking for proof. At his office, detectives searched everything. They checked his computer and personal items. It did not take long to find something important. On David's computer, they found a series of internet searches. The topics were disturbing. He had looked up things like how to frame someone for murder and perfect crime. These searches were done in the weeks before Maria was killed. This was a key moment in the case. It showed that David had thought about killing Maria and setting Andrew up to take the blame. When they searched David's house, they found even more proof. Hidden in the garage was a box. Inside were gloves, cleaning items, and a small vial with Andrew's blood. This matched the blood planted on Maria's clothes. Now the detectives were sure David had carefully planned everything to make it look like Andrew was the killer. David's carefully made plan began to fall apart. The detectives were now seeing the truth. On August 20th, 2014, after finding strong evidence, they acted fast. David was arrested at his office. He had been working as if nothing had happened. He was taken in and charged with killing Maria Thompson and trying to blame his brother Andrew for the crime. The arrest shocked everyone. David had always looked like the smart, calm older brother, the one who had life figured out. But now that image was destroyed. He was placed in a holding cell while waiting for his trial. Andrew was set free. His name was cleared, but his life was changed forever. The experience had been painful. He could not believe his own brother tried to send him to prison for murder. That betrayal hurt deeply. And losing Maria added even more pain. In October 2014, David's trial began. It became big news. Reporters gathered outside the court each day, waiting for updates. Inside, the lawyers laid out every detail of David's plan. The jury saw the camera footage, the items David had planted, and the online searches that revealed how he had planned it all. Andrew spoke in court. He told everyone about his relationship with Maria and how David used him. He said he felt guilty for the affair, but nothing prepared him for what David had done. The courtroom stayed quiet as Andrew spoke, his voice full of emotion. David's lawyers tried to say that he had lost his mind. They claimed he only did what he did because of the heartbreak. But the jury did not believe it. The facts were too strong. David's plan had been slow, careful, and cold. On November 2nd, 2014, after 3 days of talking it over, the jury made a decision. David was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of getting out. It was the end of a case that shocked the whole community and tore a family apart. Andrew had to start over. He was not guilty, but the affair had taken everything from him, Maria, his brother, and his peace of mind. The Thompson family's story became a warning. It showed how quickly life can fall apart and how secrets can destroy even the strongest family bonds. The question still lingers: what pushes someone to do something so extreme? Was it the pain of betrayal? Or a twisted need for control? Tell us what you think, and do not forget to subscribe for more true stories that explore the darkest parts of the human heart.
Remington Harrow was a successful software engineer. His wife, Cordelia, was a talented interior designer. To their friends and neighbors, they looked like a perfect couple. Their house had a well-kept lawn and a white fence, showing the world a life that seemed happy and peaceful. But behind that image, something dark was starting to grow. Remington had become interested in a strange fantasy. That interest would begin a series of events that would destroy their happy life and lead to a terrible ending. What started as an agreed attempt to explore new desires would turn into a storm of jealousy, lies, and murder. Remington Harrow was born in 1985 to a middle-class family in Eugene. From a young age, he showed a strong interest in computers. His parents, who were both teachers, supported him fully. By high school, he was already writing his own computer programs. Although he was very smart, he found it hard to make friends. He often felt like he did not fit in with others. Cordelia Astor was born in 1987 and grew up in Seattle, Washington. Her family was wealthy, and she was the youngest of 3 children. From the beginning, she was full of energy and very creative. Her parents were successful in real estate and gave her every chance to grow her talents. She took art and interior design classes from an early age. Remington and Cordelia met in 2005 at Reed College in Portland. Remington was studying computer science and was in his 3rd year. Cordelia was a first-year art student. They met by accident in the college library. Remington was immediately taken by her bright smile and easy charm. Cordelia, in return, liked Remington's quiet nature and intelligent mind. They quickly grew close. Their relationship was full of deep conversations, nights spent working together, Remington coding while Cordelia sketched, and trips to Portland's unique art spaces. Although they came from different worlds, they balanced each other well. They married in 2009, soon after Cordelia graduated. The wedding took place in a beautiful vineyard in the Willamette Valley. It was a joyful event that promised a happy life ahead. Remington had already started a well-paid job at a tech company in Portland. Cordelia began building her name in the local interior design world. For the first few years of marriage, everything felt perfect. They bought their dream house in Oakdale, traveled to many countries, and made many friends. Remington did very well at work and became a senior engineer. Cordelia's designs were featured in popular magazines. From the outside, their lives looked perfect. They had good jobs, a beautiful home, and a strong relationship. But as they got older and reached their early 30s, small problems started to show. These cracks in their perfect life would slowly grow larger. As their 10th wedding anniversary came closer, a quiet unease started to grow between them. The love they once shared so passionately had turned into something more calm, and sometimes boring. Remington, who often kept things inside, started visiting websites and forums about different types of relationships. At first, it was just a curiosity. He wanted to see how other couples kept things exciting. But as time passed, he became very interested in a specific idea. He was drawn to stories and discussions about watching one's partner be with someone else. The thought of seeing his wife with another man and finding pleasure in that stirred something deep inside him. At first, he kept these feelings a secret. He was confused and ashamed by how strong his desire had become. Remington started staying up late, saying he was working, but in truth, he was reading and watching everything. He could find about the fantasy that had taken over his mind. Cordelia, always observant, noticed a change in him. She saw how distant he had become, how his eyes would lose focus when they talked. She also noticed he was spending more time at his computer at night. Worried, she gently asked him if something was wrong, or if his work was becoming too stressful. After struggling with his thoughts for several weeks, Remington finally chose to speak honestly. One evening, while they shared a bottle of wine, he slowly told Cordelia about his growing interest. He explained his feelings and his curiosity about exploring this fantasy. As he spoke, he carefully watched her face, afraid she would be shocked or reject him. But to his surprise, Cordelia did not pull away. Instead, she listened calmly. She asked thoughtful questions, trying to understand what exactly he found interesting about this idea. Although she was unsure at first, Cordelia also admitted that the idea of being wanted by another man had its own kind of appeal. The thought of being the center of attention excited her. That night changed everything. What had once been a secret, desire inside Remington, was now shared between them. It had become something they might explore together. Neither of them could have guessed how deeply this choice would affect their lives, or how dangerous the path ahead would become. Remington and Cordelia entered this new world slowly. They talked about rules and made sure they were both comfortable. They agreed to take small steps. But finding the right person to join their relationship was not easy. They wanted someone who was not only attractive and charming, but also someone who would be respectful and private. Then Cordelia met Thaddeus Blackwood at a charity art event in downtown Portland. He was tall, with sharp green eyes and a confident way of speaking. As the owner of a well-known art gallery, he was used to being around successful and stylish people. He spoke with ease and made everyone feel drawn to him. Cordelia felt an instant pull toward his energy. They spent the evening talking about new artists and interior design trends. When Thaddeus mentioned that he was single and open to new experiences, Cordelia felt a rush of excitement. That night, she told Remington about Thaddeus. Remington's face lit up as she described him. They both agreed that Thaddeus might be exactly the person they were looking for. Remington told Cordelia to continue seeing him and to build a connection. He was clearly excited. Over the next few weeks, Cordelia and Thaddeus met several times for coffee. They said they were discussing possible collaborations between his gallery and her design business. After each meeting, Cordelia came home and told Remington every detail. These stories only made his interest grow stronger. Finally, after one, especially flirtatious meeting, Cordelia decided to talk openly with Thaddeus. To her happiness and relief, he was curious and open to the idea. He said he had been involved in similar situations before and understood how to handle them with care. Now that Thaddeus had agreed, everything was ready. Remington and Cordelia were about to turn their fantasy into something real. But they did not know that this decision would start a chain of events that would change their lives forever. The night of their first experience arrived with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Remington and Cordelia had spent weeks preparing. They had planned everything, from soft lighting in the bedroom to a fancy bottle of champagne waiting in an ice bucket. Thaddeus arrived exactly at 8 p.m., looking sharp in a dark, perfectly fitted suit. He brought Cordelia a bouquet of rare flowers and gave Remington a special bottle of scotch. This thoughtful gesture impressed them both. The evening started in the living room with drinks and casual conversation. Thaddeus shared interesting stories from the art world, showing his charm. Cordelia, dressed in a tight black dress, laughed at his jokes and touched his arm more and more as time went on. Remington sat in his armchair, sipping scotch, watching their every move. His heart beat faster with each moment they shared. As the evening continued and the drinks flowed, the atmosphere became more intense. Then, with a look toward Remington, Cordelia gently took Thaddeus's hand and led him upstairs. In the bedroom, Remington sat in a corner chair, while Cordelia and Thaddeus began to kiss deeply. When they finally moved to the bed, their bodies close together, Remington felt a strong mix of desire and a sudden wave of jealousy. The moment was powerful and passionate. Remington could not look away. The experience was stronger and more real than anything he had imagined. Later, when it was over and all three lay quietly, Remington felt a storm of emotions. He was satisfied because his long-time fantasy had come true. But he also felt a strange discomfort, like something important had changed. Thaddeus left soon after, promising to stay in contact. Remington and Cordelia stayed up talking quietly about what had just happened. They were full of excitement, but neither of them knew this. Moment had opened a door they could never close again. Feeling encouraged by how well the first night had gone, Remington and Cordelia began planning more meetings with Thaddeus. At first, they met once a month, but soon the visits became weekly. Each meeting pushed the limits further. Thaddeus stayed longer, and the nights became more intense. Remington's role started to shift too. Cordelia later shared in an interview that at first Remington was happy just to watch, but over time, he felt more involved. Sometimes, he even joined in. The power dynamics between them grew more complicated. Outside, the bedroom. Thaddeus became more involved in their everyday lives. He often joined them for dinner. He went with Cordelia to art events. Sometimes he stayed the entire weekend at their house. He was charming and fun to be around, and both Remington and Cordelia enjoyed his company, even when nothing romantic was happening. As spring turned into summer, Remington's excitement started to fade. He began feeling uneasy. He noticed changes in Cordelia. During their alone time, she seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else. She started dressing up more often, even when there were no plans to see Thaddeus. One day, Remington came home early from work. He found Cordelia on the phone, speaking softly in a way that sounded personal. When she saw him, she quickly ended the call and said it was just a client. But Remington could not shake the feeling that Cordelia had been talking to Thaddeus. In bed, she no longer showed the same passion. She was still lively during their meetings with Thaddeus. But when she was alone with Remington, she often seemed tired or distant. Remington started to make the first move more often, only to be gently turned away. He tried to take control again. He suggested they pause their arrangement and take a trip together, just the two of them. But Cordelia did not seem interested. She always gave a reason to postpone or change the topic. His job began to suffer. He spent hours thinking about every small thing, how they looked at each other, what they texted, what they said. He even started checking Cordelia's phone when she was not looking. He watched her social media and even thought about following her when she left the house. Remington knew he was losing control, but he could not stop himself. The game he started was slipping away, and he was terrified of losing Cordelia. As his fear grew stronger, so did his decision to end everything, no matter what it took. The breaking point came one warm night in July. Remington had planned a romantic evening at home. He left work early, bought her favorite wine, and cooked a fancy meal. But as the sun went down and the candles burned low, Cordelia still had not arrived. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Hours passed and the food got cold. She came home just before midnight. Her hair was messy and her lipstick was smudged. Remington's worst fears felt real now. The fight that followed was intense. Fueled by alcohol and hours of worry, Remington let out every fear and suspicion he had kept inside. He accused Cordelia of falling in love with Thaddeus, of making him look foolish, of destroying their marriage. Cordelia, caught off guard, first tried to lie. She said she was at a meeting and her phone had died. But after Remington kept pushing and pointed out how she looked, she finally admitted the truth. She had been with Thaddeus. The truth hit Remington like a punch. He had feared it, but hearing her say it broke something inside him. All the thrill and excitement they once had was gone in an instant. Cordelia cried and tried to explain. She said she still loved Remington, but Thaddeus made her feel alive again. She said she was confused. She did not know how to choose between her husband and her growing feelings for Thaddeus. Remington, with a cold voice, told her to end it with Thaddeus right away. But Cordelia, now angry too, refused. She reminded him that this had all started because of his idea. He could not now control her emotions or tell her who to love. The fight got worse. They both said things they would regret. Then, in a sudden burst of rage, Remington threw a wine glass at the wall. Cordelia, shocked by this side of him, ran to the guest room and locked the door. Remington slept on the couch that night, unable to rest, his mind full of thoughts. In the days that followed, the house felt cold and silent. They moved around each other like strangers. Cordelia stayed out of the house more often, busy with work, and Remington guessed she was still meeting Thaddeus. Remington stayed home, telling work he was sick. He drank heavily and was full of dark, paranoid thoughts. He went through Cordelia's devices, collecting every text, call, and moment she could not explain. Then he started to think about confronting Thaddeus. At first, these thoughts were just ways to deal with his anger, but slowly, they became something darker. But as the days passed and Cordelia became even more distant, Remington's thoughts grew darker and more violent. One afternoon, while Cordelia was at a meeting, Remington walked into the garage and picked up the heavy wrench he used for home repairs. As he held it, he felt its weight, and a cold thought came to him. It would be so simple to end everything, to remove the problem from his life forever. Shocked by what he was thinking, Remington quickly dropped the wrench and ran out of the garage, but the thought had already taken root in his mind. As he paced around the house, drinking glass after glass of whiskey, the idea began to grow. By nightfall, what had once been just a terrible passing thought had become a clear plan. August 15th arrived hot and heavy, with dark clouds hinting that a storm was near. Remington woke early, his head aching from too much drinking, but his mind focused. Today, he would face Thaddeus. Today, he would take back his life and his marriage. He spent the morning getting ready. He showered, shaved, and dressed as if he were going to an important meeting. But he was preparing for something far worse. In the garage, he picked up the same wrench from before. He wrapped it in a towel and placed it inside a plain gym bag. Cordelia left for work around 9 a.m. She barely spoke to him as she walked out the door. The moment she left, Remington got in his car and drove to Thaddeus's gallery. He parked across the street and waited. He watched as Thaddeus arrived, smiling and greeting his team like nothing was wrong. Remington sat there for hours, watching. As the day ended and the last customer left, Thaddeus began to close the gallery. This was the moment Remington had been waiting for. His hands shook as he grabbed the gym bag and walked across the street. Thaddeus was locking the door when he saw Remington. At first he looked surprised, then gave a small, cautious smile. "Remington," he said, "this is unexpected. Is everything okay?" Hearing his calm voice made Remington furious. He felt Thaddeus was acting too casual, as if he had not been, slowly ruining his life. Without even thinking, Remington swung the bag. It hit Thaddeus, knocking him against the door. What followed happened quickly and in chaos. Remington took out the wrench and started swinging it. Thaddeus tried to protect himself, but Remington had lost control. Each strike was full of the jealousy, pain, and rage he had held in for months. When it was over, Remington stood over Thaddeus's body, shaking and out of breath. The wrench was covered in blood. Reality hit him hard. He had just killed someone. He had destroyed his own life in a failed effort to fix it. In a daze, Remington tried to cover what he had done. He dragged the body into an alley behind the gallery and hid it behind a dumpster. He wiped down anything he had touched, including the door handle. Then, still in shock, he drove home. His guilt felt heavy, like a dark cloud hanging over him. As he pulled into his driveway, the storm finally broke. Rain poured from the sky, washing the blood off his hands, but doing nothing to clean the guilt from his mind. The next few hours were a blur. Remington stumbled into the house and barely made it to the bathroom before he threw up. The adrenaline faded, and he was left with only one thing, the knowledge that he had killed a man. He was now a murderer, moving through life like a machine. Remington began destroying any proof of what he had done. He burned his clothes in the backyard fire pit, scrubbed his car inside and out, then took a long shower. When Cordelia came home, he had managed to calm himself enough to act normal. He greeted her with a fake smile and suggested they order food and watch a movie. They sat on the couch while the television played in the background. Remington's mind was racing. He knew it was only a matter of time before Thaddeus's body would be found. He needed a believable alibi. He needed to sound prepared when questions came. He casually told Cordelia that he had stayed home that day, doing yard work and catching up on office tasks. He even showed her a small cut on his hand, saying it happened while trimming the rose bushes. In truth, the cut had come from his fight with Thaddeus. 2 days later, the news broke. Thaddeus Blackwood, a well-known art dealer in Portland, had been found dead behind his gallery. Police confirmed it was a murder. Remington first heard about it while at work, when he overheard co-workers talking about the shocking discovery. The blood drained from his face, and his hands started shaking. He had to excuse himself and rush to the restroom. The case moved fast. Detective Alana Rossi, an experienced homicide officer, took charge. She and her team started investigating Thaddeus's life, speaking to friends, family, and people he worked with. It did not take long before they uncovered his relationship with Remington and Cordelia. Cordelia, heartbroken by Thaddeus's death, first tried to hide how close they had been. But when the police showed her phone records and statements from witnesses, she finally admitted they had been having an affair. When the police came to question Remington, he was ready. He acted shocked and sad about Thaddeus's death. He admitted their relationship had been unusual, but said he considered Thaddeus a friend. He calmly explained what he had done on the day Thaddeus died, repeating the same story he had already told Cordelia. But Detective Rossi noticed something strange. Remington seemed too calm. His sadness felt like an act. She made a quiet decision to investigate him further and to examine his movements more closely. As the police worked through the evidence, they built a timeline of Thaddeus's final day. Security cameras showed him entering the gallery that morning, but never leaving. His last phone call was to Cordelia. It ended suddenly, right around the time the gallery closed. The evidence was slowly coming together. Time passed, and Cordelia's grief only grew stronger. She buried herself in work, staying late at her office and avoiding the cold, silent home she now shared with Remington. At first, Remington had seemed caring and supportive. He offered comfort and held her when she cried. But as the days went by, she began to notice small things that did not feel right. She started thinking back to all the times Remington had begged her to end the relationship. She remembered his anger, his jealousy. The more she thought about it, the more she began to feel something was wrong. Doubt turned into fear. She began watching Remington more closely, tracking his comings and goings. When he left the house, she checked his computer and searched through his browser history. She even thought about hiring a private investigator but stopped herself. Still, the fear kept growing. If Remington really had done something terrible, what else was he capable of? For the first time in her life, Cordelia was afraid of the man she had married. The man she once trusted with her heart now made her feel unsafe. The breakthrough in the case came from someone no one expected, a homeless man known to wander near the gallery, a homeless man who often stayed near the alley behind Thaddeus's. Gallery came forward with new information. He said he saw a man who looked like Remington entering the alley on the night of the murder, carrying a gym bag. This statement gave the investigation new energy. Detective Rossi and her team began looking closely at Remington's movements. They soon found traffic camera footage that proved he was near the gallery around the time of the murder, which directly contradicted the story he had told. As more evidence built up, Remington's behavior started to fall apart. He began drinking, more lashing out at coworkers and constantly looking over his shoulder, convinced someone was watching him. Cordelia, now convinced by her own suspicions, decided to stay with a friend. She told Remington she needed space to grieve, but deep down she no longer felt safe in the same house with him. The final piece of evidence came when the police searched Remington's car and home. They found small traces of blood in the car. Tests confirmed it matched Thaddeus's DNA. In the attic, they discovered the murder weapon, Remington's wrench, still stained with blood. He had hidden it, but had not been able to get rid of it entirely. On a rainy morning in September, nearly 1 month after the murder, Detective Rossi arrived at the Harrow house with a team of officers. They found Remington sitting quietly in the living room with a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. When the detective read him his rights, Remington did not resist. In that moment, he felt a strange kind of relief. It was over. The lying, the fear, the constant pressure. He could finally let go. Remington Harrow's trial was short but captured wide attention. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. His confession was filled with confusion, jealousy, and a dangerous obsession that had spiraled out of control. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Cordelia, broken by the truth of what her husband had done, filed for divorce soon after his arrest. She sold their home, unable to live among the memories, and moved out of the state, hoping to begin a new life far away from the past. The candles flickered gently along the long oak table, casting warm shadows across porcelain plates and gleaming silverware. Laughter floated through the air, light and effortless, as if this family had never known tension. Lauren sat at the head, pouring wine with a smile practiced to perfection. Her husband, Daniel, carved the turkey while telling a story he had told a dozen Thanksgivings before. Emma rolled her eyes but smiled anyway, leaning into Tyler's side. Tyler chuckled at Daniel's punchline, but his eyes flicked, just once, across the table, straight at Lauren. It was quick, barely a second, but enough. Lauren didn't look away. Emma didn't see it. She was busy texting her cousin about the sweet potato casserole. But if she had looked up, if she had seen the heat in that glance, the unspoken charge between her stepmother and boyfriend, something inside her would have started to crack. Instead, she kept laughing, passing the gravy, toasting to the family. Lauren watched Emma tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, so young, so unaware. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass, the stem almost too delicate for the pressure she applied. She relaxed when Tyler stood to get more cranberry sauce, brushing behind her chair as he passed. His hand didn't touch her, but she felt the closeness, the ghost of past nights, threatening to become real again. Across the table, Daniel wiped his hands and raised a toast. To family, he said, to honesty, to love, and to all the things that keep us together. Tyler's smile faltered. Lauren didn't lift her glass. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dead leaves against the windows. The warmth in the room suddenly felt too hot, too staged. Emma stood to collect the used plates, brushing Tyler's arm as she passed. He flinched, so small a movement, but Lauren noticed. She always noticed. She took a long sip of wine, letting it slide down, her throat like truth she would never speak. Not tonight, not in front of her husband. Not with Emma smiling so freely, thinking love meant loyalty. No one at that table knew it yet, but this was the last peaceful holiday they would ever have. The house was quiet after midnight, the kind of silence that settled heavy on the chest, thick with things left unsaid. Lauren padded barefoot across the kitchen tile, the cold biting at her skin. She opened the fridge more out of habit than hunger, staring blankly at leftovers she had no desire to touch. Somewhere upstairs, Daniel was snoring. He had long stopped asking her to come to bed, and she had long stopped pretending she wanted to. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, her robe loose, hair unbrushed. That was when she heard it, the soft creak of the back door. Her spine tensed, then relaxed when she saw him. Tyler stepped in, hoodie damp from the cold night air, a cigarette tucked behind his ear. "Didn't think anyone was awake," he said softly, brushing off his shoes. Lauren didn't smile, but she didn't ask him to leave either. "I needed air," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. She watched him for a moment, the way his jaw tightened when he was nervous, the way he avoided her eyes, like he already knew this moment was wrong. "You always come through the back?" she asked. Tyler gave a soft chuckle. "Only when it's late." Lauren turned away, opening a cupboard. "There's tea if you want, something hot." He nodded, stepping forward. Their hands brushed over the kettle. Not intentional, not exactly. They didn't talk much after that. The water boiled. She poured. They sat at the kitchen table, barely inches apart, yet 1,000 reasons keeping them apart. "I hate that house," he finally whispered, referring to his own. "It never feels like anyone hears me." Lauren's eyes lingered on him a beat too long. "Yeah," she said. "I know the feeling. No declarations, no touching. Just silence and steam curling into the air between them. But in that silence, something dangerous bloomed, something neither of them could name, something that would not stay quiet for long. Rain lashed against the windows as thunder rolled in the distance. The storm had knocked out the power, leaving only the dim flicker of candles casting shadows on the walls. Emma had gone out to pick up groceries before the storm hit, her phone unreachable in the downpour. Daniel was on a business trip. That left just the two of them. Lauren stood by the living room window, watching water race down the glass, her fingers wrapped around a glass of red wine. Tyler sat on the edge of the couch, legs tense, his eyes shifting anywhere but toward her. "It's just a little rain," she said, trying to make her voice sound light, harmless. "Storms pass." He nodded, offering a weak smile. "Yeah, they always do." The silence between them pulsed, thick, stretched, unbearable. "You want something stronger?" she asked, already reaching for the bottle. "I shouldn't. You already are," she said, topping off his glass. They drank without speaking, but the air between them spoke volumes. The crackle of tension was louder than the thunder. She sat beside him, a little closer than she needed to. Her thigh brushed. His breath caught. "Do you ever feel like no one really sees you?" she asked, her voice low, breaking open a wound they both carried. He turned to her. "All the time." She leaned in. It was not a kiss of passion, but of loneliness. A quiet, trembling need. Their lips met, soft, searching, dangerous. But Tyler jerked back, guilt crashing in faster than the storm outside. "This isn't right." The front door creaked. Emma's voice called out from the hallway, muffled under the rain. They sprang apart. Lauren stood, adjusting her robe. Tyler moved to the far side of the room, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, heart pounding. Emma stepped into the living room, dripping wet and smiling. "Lights out, huh?" Lauren returned the smile, steady as steel. "Yeah, just waiting it out." Tyler couldn't look at her, and Lauren didn't have to say a word. That single moment, they both knew, was only the beginning. Tyler received the first message on a Tuesday afternoon. "Can you help me move a few things in the garage? Daniel's out of town." He stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then typed back a quick, "Sure." When he arrived, there were no boxes, no clutter. Just Lauren in a soft cashmere sweater, sipping from a wine glass and playing an old Fleetwood Mac song low in the background. "Garage is a mess," she said with a small smile. "Thought you'd need a break from Emma's constant TikToks." He chuckled nervously, unsure if it was a joke or a dig. Lauren walked slowly past him, her perfume unmistakable. She talked about her day, about how Daniel barely spoke to her anymore. How the silence in their bedroom felt heavier than any argument. "You ever feel like someone picked you for what you could give them, not who you are?" she asked, sitting on the edge of a table, one leg crossed over the other. Tyler shifted in place, voice tight. "I don't think Emma's like that." "I'm not talking about Emma," she whispered. After that day, the invitations came more often. Laundry mishaps, a broken faucet, forgotten groceries she needed help with. Tyler started making excuses, then stopped trying. He told himself he was helping, that he could handle this, that nothing would happen again, but something already had. Emma noticed the way Tyler started checking his phone more, how he'd go quiet when she mentioned her stepmom. She watched his eyes dart away during dinner, his sudden need to get some air. One night, she reached for his hand and he flinched, just for a second. But it was enough. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just tired." He wasn't lying, but he wasn't telling the truth either. Across the house, Lauren watched from the hallway mirror, lips curled into the faintest smile. The game had begun, and Tyler was already losing. Emma had never been the jealous type. She trusted Tyler. They had plans. Dreams of moving in together after graduation, road tripping to the coast, maybe even getting a dog. But lately, something felt wrong. Not loud enough to scream, but loud enough to wake her at night. One afternoon, Tyler left his phone on the counter while he showered. Emma wasn't snooping. She just needed the Wi-Fi password. But as she opened the screen, a notification flashed. "Lauren, you're quiet today. Are you thinking about last night too?" Emma froze. The message vanished, half deleted in real time. Her heart pounded. She stared at the blank message thread, hands trembling. She waited until dinner. until Tyler sat across from her, all calm smiles and worn-out charm. She pushed the phone toward him. "What's going on with you and Lauren?" He looked at the screen, then at her. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the message," he swallowed. "She was just venting about my advice." "Advice?" "Daniel's cheating on her, or she thinks he is. She needed someone to talk to." Emma's chest tightened. "You're not her therapist, Tyler." He stood, voice rising just enough. "You think I'd cheat on you? With her?" Across the room, Lauren stepped in, casual, holding a glass of wine. "What's all this?" Emma turned, voice sharp. "You texted my boyfriend about last night. What are you doing?" Lauren blinked. "Sweetheart, that was about the thunderstorm. I told him thanks for helping me find the candles when the lights went out. Don't be so dramatic." Emma's mouth opened, then shut. Lauren's tone was too calm, too certain. Tyler nodded slowly. "It wasn't anything." Emma looked between them, suddenly unsure. She wanted to scream, to cry, but something inside her twisted instead. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe it was nothing. She smiled weakly. "Okay." Lauren raised her glass slightly, like a silent toast. Tyler reached for Emma's hand again. This time she didn't flinch. But later that night, she changed the password on her phone and started watching, quietly, closely. The motel was cheap, hidden behind a row of gas stations, curtains always drawn, parking lot slick with oil stains. Tyler sat on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, hands shaking. Lauren stood by the mirror, fixing, her lipstick like nothing was wrong. "This has to stop," he muttered. Lauren turned, calm as ever. "We already passed that line." "It's not love. You're using me." She walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I never made you come here." Tyler stood abruptly, knocking over the lamp. "You knew I wouldn't say no. You knew I'd follow you." She tilted her head. "So, what does that make me? A monster?" His voice cracked. "It makes me one." He stormed out, rain pelting down, soaking him to the bone before he even reached his car. Back home, he grabbed a pen and a legal pad, tearing into the pages like they could bleed out the guilt. He wrote everything. The first touch, the nights at her house, the motel, the lies. He signed it, folded it, and stuffed it in the bottom drawer of his desk. The next day, Emma noticed the shadow under his eyes, the way he avoided looking at her. She didn't ask. She already knew she would not get the truth. Instead, she began to search. Late at night, she sat in bed, phone glowing in the dark, searching Lauren's name through old databases, local articles, anything. Buried deep, she found it. An archived mention in a blog post from 8 years ago. A man named Travis Elcott, once engaged to Lauren, found dead after a fall from a balcony. Ruled an accident. But the blog hinted at something else. He was planning to leave. Her. A final message never delivered. Emma scrolled down, her breath caught. The pattern was beginning to form, and Tyler was right in the center of it. Tyler stood outside Emma's apartment, drenched in sweat, fists clenched at his sides. He had rehearsed. The words, twisted them into softer shapes, but they burned on his tongue no matter how he tried to speak them. When she opened the door, her smile faltered. "You okay?" He didn't answer. He stepped in, sat down, covered his face. "I have to tell you something," he said, voice hollow. "And after I do, you won't want to see me again." Emma sat across from him, waiting. And then he broke. He told her about the night of the storm, the texts, the motel, the guilt, the way Lauren pulled him in like a slow rising tide, and how he didn't fight hard enough to swim out. Emma didn't cry. Not at first. She stared at the floor, then at the photo of them on the shelf, the beach trip, her arms around him, both laughing. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. "Say something," he begged. "Please." She finally stood, walking to the window. Her hands trembled. "You could have told me," she whispered. "You could have stopped." "I tried. I was scared." "No," she said softly. "You weren't scared. You were weak." She didn't scream, didn't throw things. She simply turned away. That night, Tyler sat outside her place for hours. Lights off, no movement, no sound. He finally left, defeated. By morning, she was gone, her car missing. Phone turned off, room empty except for a half-packed suitcase and a single note on the pillow. "I need space. Don't look for me." Tyler ran to Lauren's house in a panic. "She's gone. She left." Lauren, wrapped in a silk robe, blinked slowly. "Gone? Where would she go?" "I don't know." She poured herself coffee. "Then maybe you should give her time." There was a flicker in her eyes. Barely there. But Tyler saw it. She wasn't surprised. Not even a little. The hikers found her body just after sunrise, half covered by damp leaves, hair matted with blood, face turned toward the trees like she had been running and simply fallen asleep. But there was nothing peaceful about the scene. Her wrists bore dark bruises, defensive wounds scarred her forearms, and the back of her skull was caved in. The news hit Tyler like a car crash. They found him at home, curled up on the couch, clutching the letter he had written days earlier. When the officers knocked, he didn't run. He didn't speak. He just handed over the confession, as if he'd known this moment was coming. He was booked within the hour. No lawyer, no resistance. But something felt off to Detective Kara Winslow, a 10-year veteran with sharp instincts and a colder gaze. She watched Tyler from behind the glass during questioning, his flat effect, his hollow words. "I loved her. I ruined everything. I deserve whatever you give me. It didn't sit right. No signs of forced entry. No blood on his clothes. No clear timeline placing him at the trailhead. Too many blanks." Back at the scene, the coroner noted inconsistencies. The bruises on Emma's wrists were recent, inflicted while she was alive, but the blow to her head had a strange angle. Not from a direct attack, more like a blindside, someone she trusted, someone she turned her back on. Winslow paid a visit to Lauren that evening. The woman opened the door in pearls and soft piano music playing in the background. "I heard about Emma," Lauren said, feigning shock. "God, poor girl." "You were close?" Winslow asked. "She was my daughter," Lauren said flatly. "Not by blood, but by heart." "And where were you the night she disappeared?" Lauren blinked. "Here, alone." "Why?" "No one saw you?" "I don't keep tabs on myself, Detective." Winslow glanced around. The house was immaculate, almost too composed. No photos of Emma, just a single frame of Lauren and Daniel at some gala, beaming like royalty. "Do you always keep the windows locked from the inside?" "Of course," Lauren said. "For safety." Winslow nodded, but she wasn't convinced. Something about Lauren felt rehearsed. Like grief she had practiced in the mirror, and the blood on Emma's hands. It didn't feel like Tyler's detective. Winslow sat in her office, the glow of her computer screen illuminating a web of names and dates that had been buried under the surface for years. The deeper she dug into Lauren Blakemore's past, the more it refused to stay quiet. There was Travis Elcott, an ex-fiancé who died after falling from his apartment balcony. No witnesses, no charges. A tragic accident, the report had said, but the notes from the investigating officer mentioned a neighbor who claimed to hear a fight hours before the fall. That neighbor later recanted. Then there was Miles Carter, a co-worker from Lauren's previous job, fired for boundary violations, but he'd never filed a complaint. Winslow found an old HR log. Miles had described Lauren as charismatic and cruel. and had abruptly moved states after their affair ended. The pattern was undeniable: seduction, manipulation, and silence. Tyler's confession had sounded sincere, but now it echoed with coached guilt. His timing, his certainty, the absence of emotion, it all felt too neat, too packaged. Then came the break. Security footage from a highway camera showed Lauren's car, late at night, just miles from the trail where Emma's body was found. She claimed to be home, alone. But there she was, headlights glowing through mist, a time stamp that shattered her story. Winslow returned to question her again. "You said you were home that night," she said, placing the printed still on the coffee table. Lauren stared at it, jaw tense. "I drove. I needed air. That's not a crime." "At 1 a.m, near the woods where your stepdaughter was killed?" "I didn't kill her." "You didn't say you weren't there." Silence. For the first time, Lauren's composure cracked. Her hands shook as she picked up her wine glass, an old tic the detective had started to track. Winslow leaned forward. "You're not as careful as you think." Lauren's smile returned, faint and chilling. "You're not as clever either." But the mask had slipped, and once the cracks appear, the whole thing starts to rot. The courtroom buzzed with hushed voices and flashing cameras. Reporters lined the hallway, their microphones pointed like weapons. Inside, Lauren sat poised in her tailored Navy suit, eyes dry, hands still. The grieving stepmother, flawless as always, but the narrative was shifting. Tyler took the stand first. Gaunt, eyes sunken, voice trembling but clear. "I lied," he said. "I confessed because I thought I deserved to suffer, because I let it happen. But I didn't kill Emma." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "So your entire confession was false?" Tyler nodded. "I loved her. I betrayed her. I let Lauren manipulate me. But I didn't touch Emma that night," the courtroom murmured. Then came the diary. Discovered in a locked drawer in Emma's apartment, it was a leather-bound storm, pages filled with paranoia, heartbreak, and revelation. She watches us. She twists things. I see the way she touches him when no one's looking. Tyler swears he loves me, but sometimes I feel like he's already gone. If something ever happens to me, it won't be an accident. Please let someone read this." Lauren's lawyer objected, claiming emotional manipulation, but the damage was done. Then Winslow testified, laying out the timeline, the affairs, the deaths that followed Lauren like perfume. Public opinion turned fast. The same outlets that once pitied her now questioned everything. Talk shows dissected her courtroom smiles. Online forums labeled her a black widow. The phrase "stepmother from hell" trended for days. Lauren remained silent as damning photos were presented. Her car at the crime scene, her changing stories, her refusal to take a lie detector test. When asked if she wanted to address the court, she declined. The judge narrowed his eyes. No remorse, no denial, just silence. Tyler looked away. The jury watched Lauren closely now, not as a grieving mother, but as a woman with blood on her hands and too many ghosts behind her. The courtroom held its breath as the foreman stood. The jury had deliberated for just under 6 hours. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant, Lauren Blakemore, guilty. Gasps rippled through the room. Lauren blinked once, then sat perfectly still. No tears, no collapse, just a quiet, unnatural calm. Tyler exhaled, face buried in his hands. Not relief, just exhaustion. The weight of what he had done, what he had enabled, still strangled him from the inside. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Protesters held signs, "Justice for Emma." News anchors delivered live coverage. Emma's face, soft, smiling, forever 22, looped on screens as the story of betrayal and blood captivated the nation. At sentencing, the judge's voice broke the silence. With eerie finality, "You did not swing the weapon in a moment of rage. You wielded manipulation like a blade long before this murder. You robbed a young woman of her future and poisoned every room you touched with control, dressed as care." He paused. "This is not just a case of death. It is a case of erasure, of truth, of innocence, of love." Lauren looked at him but said nothing. She was sentenced to 25 years to life. Tyler walked out of the courthouse a free man, but freedom felt more like a sentence than salvation. The headlines didn't clear his name. The whispers didn't fade. At Emma's funeral, hundreds came, classmates, neighbors, strangers. Reporters lingered outside the gates. Tyler stood in the back, unnoticed, clutching the photo they once took at the beach. He didn't speak, because what could he possibly say? He had helped destroy the only person who ever truly saw him. In the quiet suburban neighborhoods of Maryland, 2012, Maria Jenkins was everything people admired in a woman. She was the perfect wife, the nurturing mother, the woman who seemed to have it all. Every neighbor who passed their neatly kept home would comment on how lucky Maria was, how beautifully she had built her family life. Behind the closed doors of that perfect home, Maria poured every ounce of herself into raising their two children, Sophie and Liam. She attended every school, function, made homemade meals every night, and kept the house glowing with warmth and laughter. Her life was the kind many women dreamed of, and she wore her role with quiet pride, believing she was living the life her parents had once wished for her. Richard Jenkins, her husband, seemed to fit the mold perfectly. A successful businessman, with a charming smile, Richard was known for being a loving father and a devoted husband. He provided well for the family, allowing Maria to focus entirely on creating a beautiful home. At family gatherings and neighborhood events, Richard and Maria were the couple everyone looked up to, the example of what a happy, stable marriage should be. But behind that perfect facade, something was broken. Something Maria could feel even if she tried to ignore it. There were moments, fleeting but sharp, when the laughter felt forced and the smiles strained. Maria knew better than anyone that appearances could be deceiving. She had grown up hearing her mother's voice reminding her that marriage was about weathering the storms. But deep down, she sensed a storm was already brewing in her own home. What looked like a dream from the outside was beginning to feel like a silent betrayal on the inside. And Maria, despite her strength, was not sure how much longer she could pretend everything was still perfect. It started with small things, little changes that Maria tried to brush off as nothing. Richard's late nights at work became more frequent, often explained away by urgent meetings or last-minute client dinners. He would walk in hours after the children had gone to bed, offering a tired smile and a quick kiss on the forehead before disappearing into the shower. There were nights when Maria caught a faint, unfamiliar scent clinging to him, a perfume that did not belong to her. She would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling herself it was probably nothing, that stress could explain the coldness growing between them. At first, she fought against the doubts clawing at her heart. She told herself that every marriage went through phases, that life was just busy and overwhelming, that Richard still loved her. She clung to the memories of better days, the way he used to look at her, the laughter they used to share. Maybe they had simply lost their way a little, she reasoned, and they would find their rhythm again. She busied herself with the children's activities, with PTA meetings and weekend outings, hoping that if she kept the family strong, the distance would shrink back into nothingness. But the signs only grew louder. Richard's phone became a permanent fixture in his hand, always locked, always tilted away from her view. Conversations between them turned into brief exchanges about schedules and bills, void of the easy affection they once shared. When they sat down for dinner as a family, Maria could feel Richard's absence even as he sat right there at the table. His laughter, when it came, felt hollow, disconnected from the life they had built together. Inside, Maria's heart waged a quiet war. She wanted to believe in the man she had married, in the promises they had once whispered to each other under the stars. She wanted to believe that she was imagining things, that her mind was playing cruel tricks on her. She was terrified of what it would mean if she was not. Doubt crept into every corner of her thoughts, but she pushed it down, swallowing the fear and telling herself that she could hold it all together if she just loved him enough. She still believed in the dream they had built, even as cracks began to splinter through its foundation. On a cold afternoon in early January, Maria sat at the kitchen table sorting through a pile of mail. It was a routine she had followed for years, something that made her feel in control of her home, her life. She flipped through the usual stack of advertisements and bills without much thought, until her hand paused on the credit card statement. A sinking feeling twisted in her stomach before she even opened it. When she did, her hands trembled slightly. The charges jumped out at her, cold and undeniable. Multiple transactions from a hotel Richard had no reason to visit, spread out over several months. The dates matched nights he had claimed to be working late or out of town for business meetings. Maria sat frozen, the sounds of the house fading away around her. The numbers on the page blurred through her tears, but the truth was sharp and clear. Still, even as her heart cracked open with betrayal, a part of her whispered to stay calm. This was not enough. Not yet. She needed more than hotel bills if she was going to confront him. She needed proof that even Richard, with all his lies, could not talk his way around. That night, when Richard fell into a deep sleep beside her, Maria moved with the quiet precision of someone whose entire world was at risk. Her hands shook as she reached for his phone, knowing the password by heart, even though she had never needed to use it before. She moved carefully, terrified he might wake up, terrified of what she might find. As the screen lit up, message after message confirmed her worst fears. Sweet words meant for another woman, secret plans, declarations of love that had once belonged to Maria, but were now given to someone else. Each word stabbed deeper than the last. Maria sat there for hours, reading, memorizing, absorbing the truth she had been so desperate to avoid. But when she finally put the phone down, she did not wake Richard. She did not scream or cry or throw accusations into the dark. Instead, she slipped quietly out of bed and sat alone in the living room, staring out the window into the night. Her heart was shattered, but her mind was clear for the first time in weeks. Maria knew she could not act out of rage. She had the children to think about. She needed to be smarter than that. She needed to be patient. Over the next few days, she moved through her routines like a ghost, cooking meals, helping with homework, folding laundry, all while carrying the unbearable weight of what she knew. She started quietly gathering evidence, taking photos of suspicious receipts, noting down times and places, keeping screenshots of messages, building a case brick by painful brick. Maria's heartbreak was a silent thing, tucked away behind her practiced smile. She knew that the day would come when she would confront Richard, but not yet. Not until she had every piece of proof in her hand. Not until there was no possible way he could twist the truth. Her love for him had kept her blind for too long. Now it was her love for herself and for her children that made her wait. Maria still clung to a small, fragile hope that somehow they could find their way back. Maybe if she confronted him carefully, maybe if she gave him a chance to explain, they could rebuild what was broken. She could almost hear her mother's voice in her mind, reminding her that true love was about surviving the storms, not just basking in the sunshine. So she waited for the right night, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, and she sat across from Richard, heart pounding, voice trembling as she asked him the questions she had rehearsed 100 times. At first, Richard denied. everything with the ease of a seasoned liar. He smiled sadly, accused her of being paranoid, said she was imagining things because she spent too much time at home. When Maria presented the hotel receipts, the texts, the undeniable evidence she had gathered, Richard's expression shifted. His words turned sharp, defensive. He did not admit to the betrayal. He blamed her. He said she had changed after the kids were born, that she no longer made him feel important, that he had been lonely and needed someone who understood him. Each word felt like a slap across Maria's face. She had sacrificed everything for him, for their family, and now he twisted her love into the reason for his infidelity. The man she had trusted, the man she had built her life around, was standing in front of her and making her feel like the guilty one. Maria tried to reason with him, pleaded with him to see what he was throwing away, but Richard's heart was no longer with her. His eyes were cold, distant, as if he had already left their marriage long before she ever realized it. In the days that followed, Maria found herself slipping deeper into despair. Sleep became impossible, and when she did close her eyes, nightmares of betrayal jolted her awake. She moved through her days numb and hollow, trying to shield the children from the cracks splintering through their family. She still wanted to believe that love could fix this, that Richard would come back to her if she fought hard enough, but every conversation, every cold glance, every cruel word told her the truth she did not want to face. Their marriage was already dead. Only she had been too blind, too hopeful to bury it. It was a Saturday afternoon when everything finally fell apart. Maria had been running errands, picking up groceries and birthday gifts for an upcoming family party, trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy. When she pulled into the driveway, she noticed nothing out of place. The house stood there just as it always had, calm and ordinary, but the moment she stepped inside, Sophie came running up to her, her little face full of confusion and innocence. "Mommy," she said, tugging at Maria's sleeve, "who was that lady with Daddy?" They were sitting real close on the couch. Maria's heart froze in her chest. She knelt down, forcing a smile onto her face so she would not scare her daughter, but her hands shook as she brushed Sophie's hair back and asked her to tell her everything she saw. In a child's simple words, Sophie described seeing her father sitting with a woman Maria had never introduced to her, laughing, holding hands, even hugging. Maria held it together until Sophie skipped away, humming a song she had learned at school. Then she stumbled into the kitchen, leaned over the sink, and sobbed silently until she could not breathe. This was no longer about whispered texts or hotel rooms far from home. Richard had brought his affair into the sanctuary of their house, into the world of their children. The home Maria had fought so hard to build and protect was no longer safe, no longer sacred. The betrayal was complete. It was not just her heart Richard had broken. It was the trust of their entire family. Maria knew now that forgiveness was not even an option. This was not a mistake, not a moment of weakness he could repent for. This was deliberate cruelty. This was a man who had not only betrayed his wife, but had corrupted the safe space of his own children without shame. As Maria sat in the quiet kitchen, staring blankly out the window, she felt something inside her harden. She was done pleading, done hoping, done pretending. Richard had made his choices. Now it was her turn to make hers. The marriage she had fought so desperately to save was already ashes in her hands. There was no saving it now. There was only survival, and Maria knew she would survive, but Richard would never forget the price of his betrayal. The shift inside Maria was almost frightening in its clarity. She had cried her last tears for Richard. Now she would be strategic, methodical, and patient. She would not scream or threaten or warn him. She would simply destroy the illusion he clung to so desperately. Maria spent the next few days planning quietly, moving through the house with the same steady rhythm she always had, giving Richard no reason to suspect the storm that was coming for him. late at night. When the children were asleep and Richard was working late or slipping off to be with Lisa, Maria sat at the computer ordering the tools she would need. Small, nearly invisible cameras disguised as everyday items, photo frames, alarm clocks, air fresheners, and tiny voice recorders sensitive enough to catch whispered conversations. She chose each device carefully, reading reviews, ensuring they were silent and untraceable. By the end of the week, the packages arrived, tucked neatly into nondescript brown boxes that raised no suspicion. When Richard was out of the house, Maria went to work. She placed a camera inside the new decorative clock she set on the bedroom dresser. Another she tucked behind a row of books in the living room, angled perfectly toward the couch where Sophie had seen her father and Lisa sitting too close. She placed a voice recorder inside Richard's briefcase, hidden under the lining where he would never find it. Every placement was deliberate, every angle thought through. She rehearsed explanations in her head just in case he noticed something out of place, but he never did. Richard was far too sure of himself now, far too convinced that Maria had accepted her place as the silent, forgiving wife. Over the following weeks, Maria gathered everything she needed. The cameras caught hours of footage. Richard welcoming Lisa into the house, laughing with her, touching her in ways that shattered the vows he had made long ago. The voice recorder picked up whispered conversations full of promises to Lisa about a future that no longer included Maria and the children. The recordings captured Richard's real thoughts, his selfishness, his complete lack of regret. Every word, every glance, every touch between them was preserved. Maria did not watch the footage right away. She filed it carefully, methodically, building a collection that would be impossible for Richard to deny. Each file she saved was another nail in the coffin of the life he had tried to maintain. Each video, each audio clip, was a piece of the truth that Maria would one day place in front of him and everyone else he cared about. She moved around Richard with a calm he mistook for defeat, letting him dig his own grave deeper and deeper. Maria wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't begging or hoping or dreaming. She was watching, listening, documenting. When the time came, there would be no arguments, no lies, no gaslighting. Just cold, undeniable proof. Maria was no longer playing the role of the perfect wife. She was preparing to become something Richard had never seen before, his reckoning. The announcement came in late May, a cheerful email from Richard's parents inviting everyone to the annual Jenkins family reunion. It would be held, as always, at the family's large estate just outside of Maryland, a sprawling property perfect for 4th of July celebrations. There would be barbecues, games, laughter, the kind of picture-perfect day that families looked back on with pride. For Maria, it was not an invitation to celebrate. It was an opportunity, a stage crowded with all the people Richard still cared about impressing. It was the perfect place to tear down the image he had spent years carefully crafting. Maria smiled when Richard brought it up, nodding along as he spoke about seeing his brothers, his parents, his nieces and nephews. She acted like nothing had changed, like she was still the devoted wife standing faithfully by his side. Inside, she was already preparing, planning every detail with the same careful patience she had learned over the past few months. She kept gathering evidence in the weeks leading up to the reunion. More footage, more recordings, even a few photos she quietly transferred from Richard's own phone. Each piece she collected made her case stronger, made it clearer that when she exposed him, there would be no way for him to twist the story or deny what he had done. She carefully edited the footage into a short but devastating compilation, a silent film that spoke louder than any words ever could. The images were grainy, but clear enough to leave no doubt. There were no screaming fights or angry confrontations, just cold, undeniable truth. A man destroying his own family with lies and selfishness. Through it all, Maria kept up appearances. She planned meals, helped the children pack for the trip, kissed Richard goodbye in the mornings, and smiled politely when he kissed her on the forehead without a second thought. She played her role so well that Richard never suspected a thing. He still believed he had won. That Maria had accepted his betrayal, that she was too weak or too afraid to ever challenge him. He had no idea that the woman he thought he had broken was already steps ahead, holding every piece of his downfall in her hands. The reunion would not be a celebration of family. It would be the day Richard Jenkins finally faced the truth, and Maria would be the one to deliver it. The morning of the reunion arrived bright and warm, the scent of fresh-cut grass lingering in the air as Maria dressed the children and loaded the car. She moved through the motions with a steady calm, her heart beating steadily, not with fear, but with resolve. Tucked carefully inside her handbag was a small USB drive loaded with the carefully edited footage and recordings she had spent weeks assembling. Today, everything would come to light. At the Jenkins estate, laughter echoed across the wide backyard as family members hugged, swapped stories, and grilled burgers on the patio. Richard played his part effortlessly, flashing smiles, tossing a football with his nephews, charming his parents and siblings with ease. Maria stayed close to the children, keeping her own smile intact, watching every moment with sharp, detached eyes. The hours slipped by, the sun dipped lower in the sky, and as tradition dictated, the family eventually made their way inside for the evening's slideshow, photos of birthdays, weddings, new babies, proud milestones. It was meant to be a tribute to their enduring family bond. Richard's father fumbled with the laptop connected to the projector, calling Maria over to help when the file would not load properly. Maria's hands did not shake as she leaned over, slipped the USB into the port, and selected the file she had prepared. She smiled sweetly as she clicked play, then stepped back, her arms folded lightly across her chest, her face serene. At first, the room was filled with warmth and laughter as the first few familiar family photos flashed across the screen. But then, the images shifted. A grainy video played showing Richard and Lisa in the Jenkins living room, sitting far too close. Their hands intertwined. The laughter died. Whispers rippled through the room like a sudden gust of cold air. On the screen, more footage rolled. Richard slipping Lisa into the house while Maria was away. Richard leaning in for kisses meant only for his wife. Then came the audio recordings, his voice dripping with promises of a life beyond Maria and their children. No one spoke. No one moved. Richard sat frozen, color draining from his face, realizing too late that he had been caught, not just by his wife, but by everyone he had ever cared to impress. Maria stood quietly by the doorway, her expression unreadable. She did not need to explain, to scream or cry. The truth was already speaking louder than anything she could have ever said. Richard's perfect life, the image he had fought so hard to protect, was crumbling right in front of him, and there was no one left to save him. As the footage played on, Richard's panic became visible to everyone in the room. His hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He shot up suddenly, pushing through the stunned silence, lunging toward the laptop in a desperate attempt to stop the nightmare unfolding on the screen. But before he could reach it, his older brother James stepped in, grabbing him firmly by the arm and pulling him back. "Sit down," James hissed under his breath, his voice sharp with a mixture of anger and humiliation. Richard struggled against him for a moment, but James was stronger and, more importantly, furious. Richard was trapped, forced to watch his double life unravel, exposed in the most brutal way possible. Around them, the family that had once adored him sat frozen in disbelief, their faces pale, their mouths slightly open as they tried to process what they were seeing. The room, once filled with warmth and laughter, was now heavy with betrayal. Richard's mother, who had always defended him, covered her mouth with shaking hands. His father stared at the screen, stone-faced, the disappointment in his eyes cutting deeper than any words ever could. His siblings exchanged glances of disbelief and disgust, realizing that the man they had admired was nothing but a fraud. No one spoke to Richard. No one came to his defense. The footage said it all. Richard stood there, breathing heavily, his face a mask of humiliation and helpless rage. He looked at Maria, standing calmly by the doorway, and for a moment it seemed like he might say something, try to spin it, explain it away. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The whispers started, first quiet, then louder, murmurs of shame, betrayal, and anger swirling around him, suffocating and inescapable. In a matter of minutes, Richard Jenkins had gone from the golden boy of the family to a disgrace no one wanted to be associated with. There would be no saving face, no covering this up. The perfect image he had spent years cultivating had been shattered beyond repair, and the people who once loved and respected him now looked at him as a stranger they barely recognized. Maria watched it all silently, her heart heavy but steady. Richard's world was crumbling exactly the way he had crumbled hers, and for once, he had no one to blame but himself. In the months that followed, Maria focused all her energy on healing. It was not easy. There were nights when the weight of everything she had endured threatened to pull her under, when the silence of the house after the children went to bed felt too heavy to bear. But slowly, step by step, she began to rebuild not just her life, but herself. She surrounded Sophie and Liam with love and stability, giving them the kind of home that was filled with honesty and peace, not secrets and silent suffering. Maria found strength in small victories, laughing genuinely again, waking up without a knot of fear in her chest, making plans for a future she could shape on her own terms. She took up hobbies she had abandoned years ago, reconnected with old friends, and even started taking courses toward a career she had once dreamed about, but put aside for marriage and motherhood. Each step forward was a quiet act of defiance against the woman Richard had once tried to break. Meanwhile, Richard sank deeper into bitterness and regret. Every payment he sent to Maria was a reminder of everything he had lost. He moved through life like a shadow, disconnected from his family, distrusted at work, unwanted by the very people he once used to impress, the man who had once believed. He was untouchable, was now left haunted by memories of a life he had destroyed with his own hands. Maria did not waste her time thinking about his downfall. She had no interest in revenge anymore. The real justice was living her life free from the chains he had once wrapped around her. She was not the broken woman Richard had counted on her to be. She was stronger, freer, and finally at peace.
On an early autumn morning, the serene suburb of Silver Lake Heights awoke to a horror it was never prepared for. The crisp air that usually smelled of pine and earth carried an unsettling stillness. A local jogger, tracing his usual route along the wooded trails just beyond the manicured edges of the neighborhood, stumbled upon a sight so jarring it stole the breath from his lungs. Aria Collins lay motionless among the fallen leaves, her body partially hidden by the thick underbrush, her skin pale against the dark, damp ground. The woods, once a haven for dog walkers and daydreamers, had become the scene of an unspeakable tragedy. Within minutes, the area buzzed with flashing red and blue lights. Officers cordoned off the crime scene, their boots crunching against the leaves as they moved with a tense urgency. The air grew heavier, thick with the murmurs of disbelief and the metallic scent of blood, faint but undeniable. Aria's body, dressed in what appeared to be yesterday's clothes, showed signs of a violent struggle. Bruises mapped her arms and neck, and one shoe was missing, as if she had tried desperately to escape her fate. Detective Ryan Maddox arrived shortly after, stepping out of his unmarked black sedan with the calm confidence that set him apart. Tall, lean, with an unruly mess of dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, Maddox had a reputation for seeing what others overlooked. His approach was methodical but instinct-driven, the kind of detective who trusted evidence but listened closely to the whispers beneath it. As he surveyed the scene, his gaze lingered on the odd positioning of Aria's body, the almost careful way she had been left, the small personal items scattered but not stolen. Something about it felt personal, almost intimate, and not just in the way that most murders, by their very nature, violated the sacred boundary of life. He knelt beside her, careful not to disturb the scene, noting the defensive wounds on her forearms and the faint scrape across her cheek. She had fought hard, but someone stronger and determined had won. As the forensic team moved in, dusting and photographing everything in methodical silence, Maddox stood up slowly, his eyes narrowing. There were secrets buried here, secrets that Aria Collins had carried to her death, and Ryan Maddox intended to dig up every single one. Aria Collins had always been a force of nature wrapped in the softest smile. She grew up in the quiet heart of Silver Lake Heights, the kind of town where children played safely under wide oak trees and neighbors waved at one another over picket fences. From a young age, Aria stood out, not because she sought attention, but because she carried a certain light inside her, a hunger for more than the slow, predictable life the suburb offered. Teachers often spoke of her sharp mind and effortless charm, and by the time she turned 16, Aria had already set her sights beyond the narrow streets of her hometown. She dreamed of studying journalism at Columbia University, imagining herself weaving powerful stories that could change the world. But there was another side to Aria that only a few truly knew. When she was not scribbling notes in her leather-bound journal, she lost herself in painting and photography. Her art was unapologetically raw, often sensual, capturing moments of bold intimacy, fleeting glances, and unspoken desires that most teenagers barely understood. Her photographs told stories of human connection, loneliness, rebellion, and quiet passion, stories that even adults in Silver Lake Heights found difficult to confront. Some called her gifted. Others whispered that she was troubled. Home life was far less poetic. Aria's relationship with her stepmother, Selena Maddox, was a tightrope stretched thin with resentment and fragile civility. Selena, a woman of calculated elegance and sharp words, never seemed to fully embrace Aria as her own. Their conversations, when they happened, felt loaded with invisible weights, each word a test, each glance a silent accusation. Aria, who had once craved Selena's approval, slowly began to pull away, wrapping herself in the world she created with her lens and her brushstrokes. To outsiders, their family looked polished and whole. Behind closed doors, the walls heard the harshness in Selena's tone and the slow-breaking heart of a daughter who had learned to smile through it. In the months leading up to her death, Aria's friends noticed a change in her. The vibrant, witty girl who once filled every room with restless energy began to retreat into herself. She canceled plans, ignored texts, and spent hours wandering the town alone, camera always slung around her neck like a shield. Her once fiery spirit seemed dulled, as if she were carrying a secret too heavy to bear. Small moments betrayed her unease. The way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking, the forced laughter that never quite reached her eyes, the paintings that grew darker and more haunting with each passing week. There were stories Aria wanted to tell, stories she feared to voice. She had captured something she should not have seen, something that gnawed at her, blurring the lines between truth and survival. Beneath her silence, Aria was fighting a storm that no one had seen coming, a storm that had finally swallowed her whole. Daniel Cross was the kind of man who could own a room with nothing more than a smile. Born on the rougher side of Brookhaven, a small industrial town an hour south of Silver Lake Heights, Daniel clawed his way out of poverty with nothing but his wit and relentless ambition. He spoke of his past only in careful fragments, painting himself as a self-made man who refused to let hardship define him. By the time he reached his 30s, Daniel had crafted an entirely new life for himself, one of polished appearances and powerful connections. In Silver Lake Heights, he was admired as a generous businessman, a patron of the arts, and a man who hosted lavish charity galas that brought the town's elite under his roof. When he met Selena Maddox, he knew exactly what he was doing. She was beauty and ambition wrapped into one, a woman who moved through life with a glass of champagne in one hand and invisible armor around her heart. Their marriage seemed like the perfect merger, two attractive people pooling their ambitions and their secrets. What most of Silver Lake Heights did not know, or chose to ignore, was that Daniel's past carried more than just the scars of poverty. He had a history of broken promises, failed marriages, and whispered scandals buried in towns far enough away to be forgotten. Daniel wore his charm like a tailored suit, fitting perfectly to whatever occasion demanded. He knew when to be tender, when to be fierce, and when to step back just enough to make others chase him. At every town meeting, every public gathering, Daniel stood at the center, laughing easily, shaking hands, speaking in ways that made even the most skeptical trust him. His success story was intoxicating, his smile devastating. And yet behind the crafted image, Daniel Cross nursed a hunger he could never fully satisfy. In the privacy of his world, Daniel sought out what he felt life owed him: forbidden affairs. With younger women fed the parts of him that his picture-perfect marriage could not touch. His charm, once a tool for survival, had become a weapon of seduction. He lived in two worlds, one where he played the dutiful husband under the bright lights, and another where he surrendered to his unfulfilled desires in the shadows. To Daniel, temptation was not a flaw but a necessity, an unspoken right he believed he had earned through the battles of his youth. Every secret meeting, every forbidden touch, added fuel to a fire that he no longer bothered to control. Daniel believed he was untouchable. He believed he could manage it all, weave the perfect web without ever getting caught. But beneath the polished facade, cracks had already begun to form. Someone had seen too much, someone who could not be silenced with promises or charm. And in the world Daniel built so carefully, even the smallest crack had the power to bring everything crashing down. The crime scene where Aria Collins' body was discovered bore the silent testimony of violence wrapped in something even darker. As forensic teams swept the wooded clearing, every detail whispered pieces of a story that refused to be ignored. The bruises that marred her skin spoke of a struggle, but not one that fit the usual brutal pattern of random attacks. The marks, clustered around her inner arms, her hips, the tender places one would touch not in anger, but in control, in dominance. There were defensive cuts along her forearms, shallow but desperate, evidence that she had fought back, had tried to reclaim her freedom until her body gave out. Among the most disturbing discoveries was the absence of her vintage Leica camera, a possession she guarded fiercely, a birthday gift from her late grandfather. It was more than just a tool for her art. It was her voice, her shield, her identity.